I want to call this hearing to order. I want to say good morning to all of you, and I'd like to welcome the national leadership of the American Legion, the members here today, and those that are watching on TV across this country, including Montana, and I want to welcome our Montanans that are in attendance from Big Sky Country, also known as the last best place. Commander Traiola, thank you for being here today and for your advocacy on behalf of our nation's veterans and their families. The partnership and support the American Legion provides to veterans and their families is absolutely critical to ensure that they're connected to the care, to the benefits, and to the services they've earned. With your support, Congress passed the PACT Act last year, providing an unprecedented expansion of VA care and benefits to toxic exposed service members, veterans, and their families. We are now charged with the oversight as VA implements the PACT Act to ensure that the Department has the resources and the capacity to deliver the timely care and benefits that veterans deserve. This is one of my top priorities for this Congress, and I will look to the American Legion for your continued advice and support. Another priority for this Congress includes ensuring combat-injured veterans receive the full DoD and VA benefits they have earned through a bill called the Major Richard Starr Act. And I intend to reintroduce legislation to provide parity for our National Guard and Reserve members so that they receive the same benefits as those on active duty when performing the same work. We must also address mental health care and continue our work to end veteran suicide nationwide, particularly for our Native American veteran population. We need to continue to work in a bipartisan, bicameral manner to serve homeless veterans, support education and employment programs for veterans, and ensure all veterans have timely access to health care. For the veterans that are in this room today, and there are a bunch of them, I want to thank you for your service and thank you for your work on behalf of your fellow veterans. We look forward to hearing from each of you. I am going to now turn it over to Chairman Bost for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning to all of you, and thank you for being here. And I want to thank you and all of our friends over on this side of the Capitol for hosting the hearing here. And also, it's an honor to join you, Chairman, and we know that our ranking members will be along shortly. It's kind of a busy day around here, if you haven't noticed. But we do also want to thank you, Ms. Traiola, for as your position as a commander of the American Legion, the national commander, and we thank you for being here. You know, my home post is the Paul Stout American Legion Post 127 in Murfreesboro. I'm going to add to some of my script here because I want to describe the Paul Stout Post. Paul Stout was a Marine that was fought in Bella Wood and then was killed in the battle over Bella, which was just a day or so later. And he was only 18 years old, but we all know of him there at our post. And about 3 or 4 years ago, we had the 100th anniversary of the post. Now, with a name like Paul Stout and the local brewery, we made a Paul Stout beer. So we actually shared a beer with Paul Stout. So, at any rate. But before I get to the questions, and oh, by the way, I did pay my dues. I just want you to know that. But I also want to welcome the second panel in advance because they're probably going to call us out for votes. Now, I've been in attendance, attending these VSO hearings now 9 years as a member of the committee, but it's the first time I'm doing so as chairman, and it's quite an honor. So let me be the first to tell you how much of an honor it is. You know, I could never dreamed of that I'd be as an enlisted Marine corporal from Southern Illinois, son of a truck driver, that I'd be sitting in a seat here as chairman of this committee and fighting for our nation's men and women in uniform. And it is the greatest honor I've ever had to fight for the men and women who have made sure that we've stayed free. And I don't take this responsibility lightly. But as you all know, it's not about me. It's about you and the millions of veterans' voices you represent across the country. Our brothers and sisters in arms. They're who we're here for and who we fight for. The men and women of the American Legion are the greatest advocates here in D.C. and across the country. You know better than anyone else that the veterans community has earned a system that works for them. You know, I'm proud of all that we have accomplished together this last Congress, including the President signing into the Bipartisan PACT Act into law. Now, this legislation means a lot to veterans and their families. It was a long time overdue, and I was proud to see it land on the President's desk. Now, we will be focused on how the VA implements the law. You know, so many times we see the little cartoon for years about Fraggle Rock, where how a bill becomes a law. Well, when you see the bill at the bottom of the step and it's all done in a bill, it's not done yet. It's only done whenever it's done correctly, and in this case, that bill has to be done correctly. We need all of you to let us know what is happening out in the field when it comes time for toxic exposed veterans care and claims decisions. Boots on the ground testimonies are vitally important for our oversight of the PACT Act. We have also made great progress to expand mental health options through the Fox Grant Program and the Strong Act to support veterans and their families. We want to continue to see a decline in veteran homelessness. We want to work to achieve that. However, it's not finished yet, and so we still have a lot of work to do. Struggling with the stigma around mental health and not sure where to turn, getting health care in facilities that were designed for a population and medical practices of 50 years ago, fighting the VA bureaucracy and access to health care when and where it's needed, having their Second Amendment and due process rights taken away if they need help managing their benefits, which is an issue of mine that I'm going to be working on. I hope you will join me. Waiting on holding and jumping through the hoops in order to get simple questions answered, and reeling from the impacts of the EHR system, which we have to get straightened out. This might seem like small things, but when it comes down to it, they impact our veterans every day in their life. And I'm focused on making sure that smart investments to bring the VA into the 21st century. And I've said several times, even if they're kicking and screaming while we're dragging them there. And I want to make sure that the department's budget always reflects the size of the mission and the taxpayers' dollars are wisely spent. Only then will our veterans get the good care and services they've earned. And I look forward to doing this and accomplishing this goal alongside of you. And with that, I want to thank you all for being here, and I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Bost. Normally, I don't do this, but I got to ask you a question. They made Paul Stout beer,
Yes,
and was it a stout beer?
it was a stout beer.
All right.
It was a very good beer.
That's very good stuff. All right. Normally, we'd have Ranking Member Moran and Ranking Member Takano speak next, but since they're not here, we're going to turn it over to a dear friend of mine, somebody that I work with just about every day, multiple times. The biggest project is funding our defense, and it's somebody that Maine is lucky to have, Senator Collins.
Thank you very much, Senator Tester, for those kind words. Mr. Chairman, and members of this distinguished committee. First, let me commend you for holding this series of joint meetings of the House and Senate Veterans Affairs Committee. It will help ensure that the men and women who defend our freedoms receive the care and benefits that they've earned through their service. Our debt to our veterans is enormous, and it can never be fully repaid. Veteran service organizations play a key role in our efforts to meet that obligation. Today, I'm honored to introduce Vincent J. Jim Triola, a fellow Mainer and the National Commander of the American Legion, our nation's largest organization of wartime veterans. Needless to say, we in Maine are very proud that Jim has been elected as the National Commander of the Legion. Born in Jamaica, New York, Commander Triola has served our nation and its veterans honorably for more than a half century. He enlisted in the United States Navy in 1969 during the Vietnam War, served aboard the USS Nitro, an auxiliary ammunition ship in the Sixth Fleet, and then went on to the Naval Reserves, where he remained until he was honorably discharged as a third-class petty officer in 1974. Back in civilian life, Commander Triola first got involved in veterans organizations through the Sons of the American Legion, based on his father's service during World War II. In 1993, he joined the American Legion Post in New City, New York, and helped lead the citizenship, patriotism, and service projects that define the Legion in communities across the country. The commander took on greater responsibilities at the local and state levels, and in 2016, he was elected National Vice Commander. That same year, he and his wife had the wisdom to move to Windham, Maine. Upon his election as National Commander last September, Commander Triola embarked upon a challenging schedule. We think we have challenging schedules of 330 days on the road during his first year in office that will take him to Legion posts in all 50 states and overseas. And I'm delighted that his travels last fall included posts in Aroostook County, Maine. That includes post 15 in my hometown of Caribou, where I am a member of the auxiliary based on my father's service in World War II. A special focus of Commander Triola's tenure is the American Legion's Be the One campaign to end veterans' suicides. Be the One encourages family members, veterans, service members, and others to take action when they believe a veteran is at risk of suicide. The goal is to destigmatize asking for mental health support, provide peer-to-peer resources, and educate everyone on how they can be the one to reach out to a veteran in distress. I've had the opportunity to meet with the commander several times over the years to discuss a wide range of veterans issues. I'm certain the committee members will find him to be an informed, insightful, and totally dedicated individual. It is a great pleasure that I introduce the American Legion's National Commander, Jim Triola. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you.
You did a great job. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to coming back to see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Collins. Commander Triola, I will now turn it over to you to introduce your team and for you to make your opening statement. And Senator Collins, if you wish to stay, you're more than welcome. If you need to leave, you're excused.
I'd like to begin by introducing the following representatives of our more than 3 million American Legion family members. Please stand and be recognized. National officers serving with me this year. Past national commanders. Vicki Couch, President of the American Legion Auxiliary. And Chris Carlton, National Commander of the Sons of the American Legion. Chairman Tester, Ranking Member Moran, Chairman Bost, and Ranking Member Takano. It is my honor and privilege to share with you and your committees the American Legion's top priorities for the first session of the 118th Congress. I am sure you will agree that our next steps are critical because last August, we made history together. The Sergeant First Class Heath Robinson honoring our promise to address comprehensive toxic acts became law, the PACT Act. That's no ordinary acronym. It's a long-awaited message of accountability to veterans who served and suffered military-connected illnesses, diseases, disabilities, and even death from toxic exposure. It's also a message to their families, many of whom face immense challenges as caregivers or heartbreaking loss as survivors due to a loved one's exposure to burn pits, Agent Orange, bad water, atomic radiation, or other poisons. And it's an important message to young people thinking about joining the U.S. Armed Forces. Our nation's ability to attract a new generation of protectors, defenders, and liberators is ever more dependent on the government's willingness or perception of that willingness to support them when they come home changed. A young person who sees military service only through the lens of a frustrated veteran who has been rejected, denied, or left behind is not likely to enlist. In that way, our work to help veterans after service is truly a matter of national security. Now that the PACT Act has passed to help those who have been sickened by toxic contamination, and in memory of those we have lost, like Sergeant First Class Heath Robinson himself, we must fulfill the bill's deeper pledge to honor our promises. The 117 Congress made a commitment that 118 Congress now must fulfill. To ensure that the PACT Act's provisions are fully implemented, funds are sufficiently allocated, and staffing keeps up with the need. VA estimates that a backlog of more than 450,000 disability claims will be reached by October of this year. Under the PACT Act, more than 20 diseases and conditions are newly presumed as service-connected. These include over a dozen cancers. VA medical facilities are certain to be stretched to capacity and hopefully not beyond in the years ahead. Recruitment and retention of VA care providers, doctors, nurses, specialists, and others has been high on Allegion's priority list for many years. Given the demand VA can expect in 2023, that priority is more critical than ever. The same applies to Veterans Benefits Administration. As these new claims roll in, we call for regular, accurate, and transparent reporting of how the process is working, who is getting approved or denied, and the time it takes to receive a decision. These concerns were not pulled out of thin air. Some in Congress may remember the Veterans Health Care Eligibility Reform Act of 1996, which the American Legion strongly supported. The bill greatly expanded VA health care eligibility for honorably discharged veterans. VA aggressively marketed its services to unenrolled veterans. They poured into the system. Within 5 years, however, VA was overrun. But history must not repeat itself with a new generation of veterans entering the system for the care they earned and deserve. It is our belief that VA has the requisite tools granted to them by Congress in the PACT Act to meet the needs of those they are committed to serving. We urge the members of these committees to continue to fund and provide the necessary oversight as VA implements this historic piece of legislation. To put it simply, promises must be kept. Pact, promise, and honor are terms we also urgently apply to the epidemic of veteran suicide. The American Legion's Be the One initiative, which raises awareness nationally about the problems and seeks to destigmatize asking for help, is our organization's highest priority today. To us, suicide prevention is a pact we share with our friends and comrades of military service, a promise from each of us in the American Legion to be the one to save at least one other veteran from suicide. President Biden acknowledged the importance of veteran-to-veteran peer support in this mission. We in the American Legion are those veterans, those peers, and we look to Congress and VA to make full partners of us as measures are taken to strengthen VA mental health services and suicide prevention programs. We look forward to working with VA on a new National Buddy Check Week and to building on the proven success of peer-to-peer help for at-risk veterans. we ask Congress to support the funding and staffing requests necessary for VA to strengthen its role and help us save lives. We all view this kind of support for veterans as a promise to fulfill. In addition to the men and women now finally getting the attention they need for conditions related to toxic exposure, our pact with those who have served must extend to men and women facing post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, or the effects of military sexual trauma. Caregivers whose lives are permanently changed by the effects of military service. Veterans and military families in transition who can strengthen our economy, and themselves by accelerated programs to convert military training hours into credits for specialized civilian careers. Our pact extends to Coast Guard personnel who serve in the only military branch that forfeits pay in the event of a government shutdown. National Guard and Reserve personnel and veterans who have earned and deserve a more level GI Bill playing field. Military retirees who are wrongly taxed out of their pensions because they sustained a service-connected disability. And that is why we support reintroduction and passage of the Major Richard Starr Act. And veterans who are preyed upon by companies that charge high fees for claims, assistance that the American Legion and others provide free of charge. Or unscrupulous law firms that fleece veterans out of Camp Lejeune Justice Act settlement damages through uncapped legal fees. And as we examine our promises, we cannot break faith with our Afghan allies in the global war on terrorism. They put their lives and the lives of their families on the line for us, and they continue to do so. Bureaucratic delays in their ability to obtain special immigration visas and clear pathways to U.S. citizenship are clearly the definition of broken promises, and again, a serious matter of national security. Members of this distinguished committees, let's make a pact of our own to honor the promises we have made and still need to make on behalf of all who have pledged, risked, and given their lives for our freedoms. Chairman Boss, Chairman Tester, and members of the Committees on Veterans Affairs, on behalf of the American Legion, I thank you for giving the nation's largest veterans service organization the opportunity to share our priorities. I welcome any questions you have for me, our commission chairman, or national staff. And if you'll allow me to introduce one person I missed, because otherwise I'll be in the doghouse for a year. My wife, Severia Triola, behind me.
Smart move. So, appreciate your comments. Thank you very much. Message delivered and message heard. Thank you. Can you tell me, in your assessment, how the VA is performing under its current leadership?
Mr. Chairman, we have we believe, an excellent relationship with VA. We have an excellent relationship with the Secretary of the VA. As a matter of fact, the Executive Director, Shenin, next to me, works with the Secretary on a daily basis, and I'm going to defer to him to speak about this further.
Mr. Chairman, we have thank you for that question. We have a great relationship with the Secretary and the Undersecretaries at VA. They respond to every concern or question we have. They embrace us as partners, and I would like to say that we work together well in helping, as the Secretary says, fight like hell for veterans. So I think the partnership is great, and they're doing a great job.
Thank you. I appreciate your Be the One campaign. I think you hit the nail on the head. This is a huge issue amongst our population, particularly our veteran population, and I appreciate the work that you do. Last Congress, we passed a bill called the Strong Veterans Act. It was passed in the Omnibus Appropriations Bill. It adds staff to vet centers. It allows for VA training of the employees. It has outreach to Native American vets. It has VA scholarships to mental health providers. It's a big bill, but my question is, and it just got passed, very recently. Have you been able to use it, or do you intend to use it? And is it going to be useful in your Be the One campaign?
Thank you for that question. I'm going to defer to our VA&R Chairman, Audrey James.
Good morning, Senator, and thank you for that question. I do want to let you know that the intent of the American Legion is absolutely to use the STRONG Act. That act itself helps us to make sure that we're making sure that we're reaching those veterans in rural areas and ultra-rural areas. The idea that we can also ensure that we are getting the ability to bring in individuals from local schools, such as HBCUs, and other organizations makes it a phenomenal piece of legislation that will only strengthen the VA going forward.
Thank you. Thanks to feedback from veterans, caregivers, and VSOs, the VA is doing a comprehensive review of eligibility requirements for caregivers. It's a big issue. VA has also suspended annual reassessments of veterans, and guaranteed legacy participants could remain in the program until 2025. From the American Legion standpoint, what recommendations would you have for the VA to ensure that the eligibility requirements for the caregivers program can work, that they're fair?
I'm going to defer again to the VA&R Chairman for his remarks.
Perfect.
Thank you. So one of the things that we want to make sure of in terms of the caregivers is that the Congress and VA ensure that family caregivers are provided better access to mental health support. We know that that is a problem with our caregivers, particularly when they're taking care of veterans with mental health and substance abuse issues. So that's one area. But we know that oversight is always key in making sure that we are meeting the needs of those caregivers. We understand that in 2025 there may be some issues on the horizon in terms of where VA is currently and where they have to get in 2025. But we are confident that we can make sure that our veterans are going to be taken care of as well as their caregivers.
Thank you. Senator Hassan?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and to you and your House Chair and the ranking members. Thank you. More importantly, thank you to the veterans here today for your service, and thank you to your family members as well. Mr. Troiello, I want to just touch base with you on the importance of peer-to-peer support. As you noted in your testimony, peer support programs encourage veterans to reach out and connect with one another proactively, which improves veterans' mental health and helps prevent suicide. The American Legion recognized the importance of these programs when it created the Buddy Check program in 2019. I was pleased to help expand this effort through the passage into law of the Bipartisan Buddy Check Week Act, which calls on the VA to support and grow the program. Why are peer-to-peer support programs so effective at supporting veterans' mental health, and what more can Congress do to support these programs?
Well, thank you very much, Senator, for your sponsorship of the Buddy Check Week Act. It's very important to us. The importance of the Buddy Check is that we have veterans speaking to other veterans, and I think the camaraderie between the two goes a long way. And I think the veterans that are in need will hopefully be able to destigmatize them by developing trusting relationships with them, and that's easy to do with a veteran talking to a veteran.
And we've seen the effectiveness of that, right? I mean,
Yes, we have.
that's
Yes.
direct
Works.
evidence that it works, right? As you noted in your testimony, the average age of a VA medical facility is approaching 60 years, which limits the ability of VA healthcare to keep up with new technology and respond to shifts in veteran demographics. For example, the VA Medical Center in Manchester, New Hampshire is 73 years old and has had numerous maintenance failures over the past few years, including 3 separate water pipe breaks that resulted in canceled appointments for veterans. I've called on the Secretary of the VA to prioritize long-term solutions for these problems. Can you expand on your testimony and discuss why upgrading VA infrastructure is important for our veterans to get the health care that they need and have earned and deserve?
One thing I've seen is that we 31 new C-blocks were just authorized, so that's
Yeah, that's
a
good.
great thing. And I do notice some in Maine, and Togus is under construction right now with specialty care
Yep.
facility being added on. That's a big plus. But for further detail, I'm going to pass it on to our VA&R Chairman, Audrey James.
Thank you.
Yes, Senator, with the issue with respect to modernization of the VA in general, we believe that first, yes, new facilities do need to be brought online. We need to make sure that those facilities are in the areas where our veterans are, where the majority of our veterans are. But we don't necessarily believe that the older facilities should just be torn down. In my state of California, for instance, local hospitals, what they did was they built a new hospital, downsize the old hospital and use that for clinical issues, so not acute care like a hospital might take care of. And I think that that's one way that the modernization of the VA could be helped.
Well, thank you. Focus continues to need to be on making sure the facilities are there for our veterans when they need them. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Hassan. Now you get hit by another Mainer, who's also a really good guy, Senator King.
Well, I've already learned something today from Commander Triola that, which I think I'm going to adopt. When a tough question comes, you just refer it to somebody down the road.
That's what delegation is about.
That's a pretty good, yeah. My leadership motto is hire good people and take credit for what they do. So I think it's working for you. The other thing I want to say, you should know this, because I sat in that chair in the Senate last year. The PACT Act would not have passed but for John Tester. He was absolutely dogged, both on the floor of the U.S. Senate, but also person to person in the Senate, to make sure that happened. As you recall, there were some slips along the way. It wasn't easy, and I think you should know that was a serious commitment. Two questions. One is, there's been talk about the word buddy. One of my principal concerns is the transition from active duty to veteran status, and that people talk about a warm handoff. One of the ideas my veterans are talking about is a buddy system where when someone's leaving active duty, a notification goes out to the state veterans organization, and that can then go out to the VSOs. I want somebody to meet that veteran at the airport and say, welcome home, we're glad you're here. And I see that, this isn't a big expensive new program. I see that as a partnership between the Legion, the VFW, the VSOs generally, to work out the logistics of being sure somebody's there to meet that person who's knowledgeable about benefits. Is that an idea that appeals to you?
Yes, it does. And, we do have American Legion posts all over the nation.
Right.
That meet active duty service members that are being discharged at the airports, and we hold events for them in the posts, or we have some sort of a get-together at the base where they come in. But for further detailing, Madam, I'm going to pass this over to our Veterans Employment and Education Chairman, Jay Bowen. Pretty good at delegation, so there he is.
You're good.
Thank you, Commander, and thank you, Senator, for the question. That brings up a very interesting idea, and you should know that we have already started having those discussions around the country with posts, and what we want to do is enter into a sponsorship program, and instead of calling them buddies, they would be that new veteran's sponsor when he or she first comes home, and helps them get oriented to the neighborhood and the community.
Well, I would like you to communicate with us what we need to do to make that happen. And it may just be poking the VA, it may be some legislation, I don't know. But please reach out to Senator Tester, to the committee, because I think this is something where we can make a real difference. I'm out of time, but I just want to suggest one other issue that I think we all need to be thinking about, and that is long-term care. There's a wave of retirements coming and eligibility for long-term care. And it's, as you know, it's not directly part of the system, but I think it's something we need to think seriously about. And again, I'll ask you to supply us with your thoughts and how we might be able to work on that, because I'd rather deal with it now rather than 10 years from now when it's upon us and it's a crisis. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for your service to the United States.
Thank you, Senator King. And I was just going to say, if you want another 3 minutes after that first comment, you can have at it. It's fine. Look, the folks are going to come back, in the House in particular, they have.
I do have a follow-up if you,
Sure, go ahead.
the other issue I'm concerned about, and I'd like your response, is VA staffing. If there's nobody to answer the phone, that's just not going to work for the veterans. Do you have thoughts about that? We just reported out the Careers Act last week, and I think that's going to help. But give me some thoughts on VA staffing and what we can do to improve it.
I'm glad you brought that up because I had a discussion about this just yesterday. We believe that VA needs to come up with some sort of incentives to increase their staffing. You know, they have issues with physicians, and I guess there's a salary cap in there somewhere.
Yeah.
But there's got to be some sort of an incentive, whether it's the commutes or the amount of days they work or whatever it is. But this has to be solved. You know, I travel all over the country, and I visit VA hospitals. I visit about 8 of them already. And we've found out that there's a severe shortage of mental health therapists. And it's a real problem because of what is going to happen, especially with this PACT Act coming on. We're going to be in real trouble if we don't solve this problem soon.
Well, and you mentioned there is a salary cap, and it makes the recruiting physicians non-competitive, basically,
Yes.
with the private sector. I just learned that the salary cap is the president's salary. Nobody
Yes,
in
it
the federal
is.
government
Yeah.
can be more than the president. When I was governor of Maine, there were about 200 people in state government. They made more than I did. So I think we could live with moving that cap a little bit.
We'd like to work together with you to see if we could come up with some sort of, to incentivize or fix this problem, because I think it's only going to get worse before it gets better as we have an influx of more veterans going in for health care.
Let me ask a detailed question, and this came from a veteran in my community who's gone through a good PTSD program. His suggestion, though, is there ought to be a follow-up of like a group, like an AA, somebody to meet with after going through the treatment process. Do you have someone here who can talk to me about that? Because dealing with PTSD, as you know, has been a major challenge.
Yes.
The VA's getting better at it, but this suggestion is to take it one step further. And again, it's not a big, expensive program, but to have some follow-up so it doesn't just end the day you walk out of the treatment program.
I'm going to defer to VA&R Chairman Audrey James.
Thank you, Senator. With respect to additional follow-up, one of the best benefits that we have right now within the VA system is our vet centers. Now, an idea that one may have is that perhaps we can open those vet centers up to others other than those combat veterans. I think that the vet centers and the care that they take upon our combat veterans can also be used to ensure that those who are suffering from PTS triggered by other areas will be extremely beneficial. So I think the American Legion would love to see that happen.
Good. Thank you very much. I see that our other members have joined us, so I'll hand back the chair. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Tillis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here. I don't know if any of my other members have asked this question, but we always like to be proud of folks that come from our state or may have been stationed in our state. By show of hands, how many of y'all have been blessed to be in North Carolina for a period of time? That's what I'm talking about. Thank you all for your service. Yeah, I want to be brief. I'm in a Judiciary Committee hearing with the Attorney General, but I was waiting to see when I could come down and speak with you all. First, thank you for your service past and your willingness to continue to serve. I think in this Congress, after months of working on the Camp Lejeune Toxics Act and the TEAM Act, I found myself in the difficult position of having to vote against the PACT Act. Wasn't because I didn't support the underlying policy, it's because I think we need to make sure that we fulfill the promise. We're seeing an increase in wait times. We're seeing hundreds of positions that were not filled before we made a new promise. And now we got to make sure that we do everything we can to support the VA. I know the chair agrees with this, but we're going to need your help in identifying the priorities for things that we can do first. I was not against the PACT Act, the legislation. I was concerned with the implementation and a number of other things that now it's on us to make sure that we fulfill. I'm also a bit curious, the Camp Lejeune Toxics Act was very important. It's something that our office originated here on the Senate side, working with our colleagues in the House. But I do not like those damn ads. And the reason I don't like them, is I go back in my mind and think, if you're spending this much money several times in a 30-minute cycle, that's money that's not going to the veteran. And now there's been recent reports, I believe Bloomberg's doing research on this now, to where some of these law firms are being predators. I mean, they are charging over 50% for benefits that I want to get into the pockets of veterans who deserve it. So we need to have a serious discussion about how we can cap legal fees, how we can make sure, and we also have to make sure through all of your organizations that folks know the first call you make should not be to a lawyer. They're trying to make it look like they're the only way you can get your benefits. We worked on that bill to provide pathways that doesn't include a lawyer's fee. And we also know that y'all play an important role in helping avoid those legal fees. I also think that the members of Congress can play a role. So anybody in North Carolina who may see that ad, the first number they should call, if it's not a veteran service organization, should be my office, because we want to do everything we can to take the predators out of this loop. There are some good ones, but I see a lot of bad ones, and we need your help to work on it. But thank you all for your service. I know that the work is hard, but I think you know that we've got a bipartisan group here in Veterans Affairs and bicameral group that understand we've got several installments on a debt we'll never fully repay. Thank you all for your service.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tillis. It helps when fully 1/3 of the crowd is from North Carolina, you know. Representative Miller Meeks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Tillis. My husband's family is from North Carolina. They were in the Marines. The rest of us were Army and Air Force, so 24-year vet myself, and thank you for all your efforts. My family is from the Camp Lejeune area on my husband's side. The House has been called for votes, so I'm going to be brief. Commander Triola, can you go into more detail about the American Legion's efforts to destigmatize asking for mental health support? In Iowa, we have a buddy system that works very well, and specifically, I'd like to hear about your peer-to-peer support efforts through your Be the One program and educational outreach.
Thank you, and thank you for your service. I preach all over the country about Be the One, so I'm pretty good on the subject. The destigmatized part of it, you know, we want to make sure that a veteran or somebody from our Legion post or a member of the Legion or even a community member starts a discussion with a veteran in need. And we want to make sure that we destigmatize that veteran to the point where we can develop a trusting relationship between that veteran and us. And as soon as we do that, we feel that not only will that start a trusting relationship, but what I asked is that the person that's starting the conversation stays with that veteran until they start getting their treatments and even along the road, so that that veteran can call them and get advice if they want. You know, veterans that don't want to step forward have a lot of obstacles in their minds about losing security clearances, their families, their children, their jobs, whatever it is. And that's a very important part of it. But the other part of it is what we do is once we get that veteran to step forward, we, in the Legion Post, what we're doing is we're setting up resources within the community where that Legion Post is, so that when that veteran comes forward and they want help, we can get them immediate help. You know, a lot of times, we've talked about this earlier today, is about you call the VA and you may have a wait time, but maybe somebody in that local community can get help for that veteran. So they identify all the resources that they have. They invite the veteran's family into the post, because sometimes even that veteran may still be a little croaky about telling us what's going on, and maybe a family member may say something that will identify a problem.
Thank you so much, and as a fellow veteran from a family of veterans, I thank you for that, and thank the American Legion for all the work it's done in this effort. Thank you.
Thank you.
I yield back.
Thank you, Representative. Before I get to Senator Sullivan, I just want to tell you, Senator Sullivan, before this hearing started, I met a guy that's a dead ringer for you. And I didn't catch his name. Right there. That's you, man. He said that you used to work for him.
Is that General Hartzell?
Yes, it is.
I thought you were talking about Senator Tillis, but
No, this guy really does look like you. Tillis is just what?
yeah. Are you calling on me now, Chairman?
I am.
All right, okay. I hope I get extra time for that little exchange. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank all the veterans here today. I love this hearing. It's so great that you guys are back in town. I don't know about you, but I had a serious case of Zoom fatigue over the last 3 years. So it's just great. When you're walking the halls of Congress, it's nothing more important. And it's a giant honor for me to serve on this committee representing the state, which has more veterans per capita than any state in the country. Mr. Chairman, that might be the first time you've heard that, the great state of Alaska. That's a joke between us because I say that in every damn hearing for the last 8 years. So if you're from Alaska, can you please stand and come on, we got a great, there we go. How about a round of applause for my fellow Alaskans? And I know General Hartzell's here, so it's great to see you, sir. I want to begin by focusing on an issue that's we really need to solve here soon. It's been the fault of the Congress, and I'm hoping that this hearing and all of your meetings in different with different members of the Senate and the House can really make a strong advocacy of this, and it's the Camp Lejeune Vets Act. And I'm very honored, Commander Triola, that you emphasize this in your opening remarks. But for those who don't know what this is about, all you got to do is turn on the TV. It's really disgusting in my view. You got the Trial Lawyers of America who are working to rip off the veterans and families of sick Marines, okay? It's a choice. My bill is a choice between taking care of sick Marines and their families or enriching trial lawyers. I think the answer of every single one of you is, what should we be doing? Taking care of the Marines and their families, okay? I'm going to get a little political here. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle sometimes listen to trial lawyers too much. Not this goddamn time, all right? Not this goddamn time. I'm serious about this. We've had a hearing, there's been over $1 billion of advertising. You see it, still happening. No caps right now on contingency fees. There are some of these groups that are going to try and rip off people. It's simple. We need to put caps on the fees that lawyers are going to get on this Camp Lejeune issue for the sick Marines from Camp Lejeune. It's simple. And I'm so honored that the American Legion has endorsed this. Commander, do you want to speak to this? I know you put it in your testimony, and I really appreciate you doing that. But just how important it is, I know it's your top 1 or 2 priorities for the entire Legion, but enough. Let's pass this unanimous consent, Mr. Chairman. This is not hard, not hard. I go down, I try to do unanimous consent. Unfortunately, I get some of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle who block me. It's baloney. Commander?
Senator, thank you. We share your concerns deeply. It is a disgusting thing every time you turn the TV on. But I'm going to defer to Lawrence Montreux. He's our legislative director in Washington, and he's going to speak to you in detail.
Thank you, sir. We really appreciate your leadership on this issue, and I think we're all well aware of the billions of dollars that have been spent on advertising. Senator Tiller.
By the way, you think they're spending billions to take care of the Marine families?
No.
Hell no.
Senator Tillis has highlighted as well. And when we look at other pieces of legislation that govern lawsuits, whether it's accredited representatives representing individuals before BVA, they're capped.
Yeah.
Lawsuits under the FTCA are capped. And we're just asking for the same thing to protect our veterans who've already suffered undue harm. We want to make sure they can secure access to legal representation, but not take it advantage of. So we appreciate it, and we definitely support you.
By the way, the Biden administration Justice Department agreed with us, right? Your point is exactly right, that pretty much all other legislation that has these kind of recovery things, you cap the litigation fees. And these are, we're hearing stories of 60% contingency fees. I mean, that's criminal. That's stealing. And by the way, these lawsuits aren't even that difficult because the government doesn't have defenses, right? If you move it and prove it, it's not like going through big discovery. This is an abomination of the legal justice system, and I've never seen an issue that calls out for more justice. And I really hope my colleagues on this committee, because you know who you are, who've been blocking it, because you're putting the interests of trial lawyers before the interests of Marines and their families. It's disgusting. And I hope you guys raise it in every single one of your meetings. Tell you what, I'm going to try and you see this. That means unanimous consent. I go down on the Senate floor and I try and pass my bill. Then one of my Democratic colleagues usually blocks it, always blocks it. I'm going to do it again soon. And I'm going to do it on the basis of your power and influence. And I'm going to say, I spoke in front of our veterans. They went to all your offices. They all support it. It's one of the top priorities. The Biden administration, for God's sake, supports it. The Secretary of the VA was just in Alaska. I hosted him last week in my great state. He supports it. There is no reason that when I unanimously consent this next week that anyone should block it. And if they block it, Mr. Chairman, you should come down on the floor with me and help me move it. You going to do that, sir? How about getting the chairman to come and do unanimous consent with me?
Senator Sullivan.
You're hearing it. You're the chairman of the committee. Take care of our veterans, sir. Come on.
Senator Sullivan.
You know this is a big issue.
Senator Sullivan, it is a big issue, and we need to have access to lawyers. Do I think we need to have caps? Yes, we do have to have caps, but they have to be caps that allow a veteran to be able to have legal representation if they need it. And that is the rub. There are people that are working in a bipartisan way to get a solution for this, because you're right. It's not what we want to have happening to the money that we've appropriated, not to go in the line the pockets of lawyers, but to line the pockets of the people who have sacrificed for this country. And we don't need to have a debate on this in front of this. We're to hear from the Legion, and we appreciate it. And the other question I would just say is, you've used more time than King did. And so I've got...
Well, I thought, given the intro that we did, that you agreed to give me a few additional minutes. So I apologize for going over my time limit. Thank you,
I got to say, Mr. Chairman, it's the first time I've ever heard him say anything nice about the Biden administration. that was
That's true, but...
it's good, but we do need to get...
All right, I'll yield back. Thanks again for all my fellow veterans here. It's great to see you. Thanks for your great advocacy, and we're going to get this done.
Yep.
We're going to get this done. We got to get this done. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Sullivan. Senator Blumenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Everyone from Connecticut, please stand. I'm Richard Blumenthal from Connecticut. Thank you, fellow members of the American Legion. Thank you all for being here today. I'm proud to be the principal author and sponsor and leader on that Camp Lejeune legislation that provides for those Marines and their families who have been disgustingly the victims of contamination. And I want to thank the American Legion for being here today and for your support on that measure, on the PAC Act, which provides care and benefits for all of our military men and women who have suffered the effects of the burn pits and toxic chemicals. Two of my sons have served during these 20 years, one as a Marine Corps combat infantry officer in Afghanistan, the other as a Navy SEAL. And so I think we all see these issues not only through the eyes of our generation, but also the generation that has followed us in service, and the American Legion has stood strong. I want to just ask you, first of all, you would support a compromise that put caps on compensation for lawyers, but still enable them to have access to legal representation, would you not?
Yes, sir. We certainly appreciate that question. I think our desire here is to get this legislation passed. At the end of the day, there needs to be caps. We can have negotiations about what that number is. I think that our objective at the end of the day is to ensure, one, veterans aren't being abused and taken advantage of, and monies appropriated by Congress are not going into the pockets of lawyers with nefarious intent, while maintaining the ability to secure access to quality legal representation. So we're certainly open to discussing what that number is. And frankly, it's less of a concern what that exact number is. We want to make sure there's a cap and that veterans aren't being taken advantage of.
And just so you know, and maybe it's been said already, but I want to emphasize it, there are ongoing conversations involving both sides of the aisle, including my colleagues who are represented on this committee. What you want at the end of the day are caps that are fair. You want a bill. You want legislation. You don't necessarily want a speech. You don't need a speech. What's needed is fair caps, correct?
Yes, sir. Our desired end state is that there is a bill that becomes law and that protects veterans in a timely manner, because there are timelines associated with when veterans can file these claims. Veterans are feeling pressured to file these claims, not only by the law firms, but the timeline that exists for them to file those claims. So a compromise, whatever that may look like, that ensures that veterans have access to quality legal representation and they're not being taken advantage of, is our desired end state.
And I hope that the American Legion will join us in Connecticut and other states around the country in trying to make veterans more aware of their rights. Because a lot of veterans don't even know they have this right. Put aside the lawyers and the caps and all the legalese, we need to make more veterans aware of their rights under the PAC Act, as well as under the Camp Lejeune care and benefits. And I know the American Legion can play a constructive role in helping accomplish that goal, as well as improving, and I want to make this point very, very emphatically, improving the facilities, the hospitals, the infrastructure that is available through the VA healthcare system. I have pummeled our VA secretary with requests and questions about upgrading hospitals, rebuilding, renovating, because our veterans deserve it, and so do the professional staff, extraordinarily qualified and dedicated docs and nurses who work in those facilities. Not the secretary's fault necessarily. We need to appropriate the money to invest through that infrastructure. We're investing in all kinds of infrastructure. Why not our hospitals for VA facilities? Our veterans deserve it. So my time has expired. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Blumenthal, and I know we'd like to debate this, Senator Sullivan, but
Chairman, can I
I
just
love
make one
debate.
point?
Trust me.
Just
Go ahead. One point.
One point. Again, my bill, which the American Legion has endorsed, has 17% trial or award caps, which is reasonable, 12% caps on the filing. And so the American Legion has endorsed that, and we think that's fair, and I hope my colleagues agree with the American Legion. That's fair. There's no need for more compromise. The higher the caps, the less the families of sick Marines and sick Marines get. So
Thank you
the
for
compromise has been done. Take 17%. Thank you.
Thank you for the explanation. Senator Bozeman has been hard work on the Ag Committee trying to get a farm bill ready for prime time.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, I am in the middle of a hearing right now on conservation as we go forward with the next farm bill, which is so important for so many different reasons for our farmers and rural America. But I wanted to come by and give a special shout out to those of you from Arkansas, the tremendous work you do, but also in a very bipartisan way, Republicans and Democrats working together have been able to accomplish a lot, but we wouldn't have gotten any of it done without you all. And there's nothing more pleasing to all of us to sit and see all of the hats out there and the this and that, that recognizes you as veterans and that you're up here talking to your representatives, telling us how important these things are, helping us to push these things along. So thank you for your service. Thank you all. Thank you for your tremendous staffs that do such a great job. And with that, I'm going back and talking about conservation. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We appreciate that very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Bozeman. I want to talk about the Major Richard Starr Act for just a minute. You addressed it in your opening comments, Commander Triola, and this is allowing combat disabled veterans to collect their full DOD retirement pay and VA disability pay without it being offset. Now, this is an instance where folks who are injured in combat, they have to retire out of the military because of that injury, don't get full disability pay and full retirement pay. What would you do to change, what would you do to make sure that the Legion members are addressed that have this issue, and why is it important that we get this legislation passed?
We share your concerns with this, and we want that Major Richard Starr Act to get passed. But for further details, I'm going to pass this off to our VA&R Chairman, Autry James.
Sure.
Thank you for that, Senator. It's important to understand that these are two separate pools here. There's individuals who have earned their retirement because of service. There's individuals who have sacrificed themselves and should be compensated as well. All of that, none of that should be taxed in any way. There should not be any type of offset or anything of that nature. It's important that the work that they've done throughout the years that they served is recognized, and it's equally important that the work that they've done to protect this nation and the sacrifice that they've given is also compensated and recognized.
Thank you very much for that answer. I want to, and this has been asked a little bit for in a little bit different way. Senator King, I believe, addressed this issue, and it deals with hiring. It deals with the caps. It deals with allowing the VA on the manpower side of things, both nurses and docs, and benefits managers to be able to hit the ground running. You had said, Mr. Commander Triola, that you had been around to 8 different hospitals. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm gonna. What kind of, were any of those hospitals fully staffed, first of all?
None of them were fully staffed.
None of them were fully staffed. And can you give me an idea, was the deficiency in nurses or doctors or both? Or, yeah.
It was physicians mostly and mental health therapists.
Okay.
And there's also a shortage on, there's mental health therapists required for women. A lot of women won't talk to a male therapist.
Yes.
So there's a critical shortage of women mental therapists as well.
Very good. I am waiting for, by the way, if we get the Careers Act bill passed, I'm not saying it will be the silver bullet that will solve all their problems because we've got some workforce issues out there, getting more doctors and mental health care professionals into society. But I think it will make a difference that you'll be able to see on the ground when we get it across. Senator King.
I just wanted to put a fine point on the point I made about long-term care. Just got some figures. In the next 25 years, the VA estimates the number of elderly veterans will double, and the number over 85 will go up by 40%. So that just gives us a flavor of how significant this issue is about to become. The other piece is, to go back for a minute to the transition, also serve on the Armed Services Committee, so I get to see both sides of these issues. One of my problems is that the active duty side, the Pentagon, the Defense Department, I don't believe put adequate resources and effort into the transition out. I've been saying for 10 years that they should put as much time, money, and effort into the transition out as they do the recruiting in. I think that's just a basic way to look at this.
When is Ross coming back? Do you have any idea?
Should be coming back right now from his notes, just called.
So again, my question to you, and you can give me an answer now, but also if you could give us in writing later, thoughts about specific ways we can improve that so that the person leaving, because the suicide issue, the data shows us that the first 2 or 3 years after separation is a danger period. And that's why one of the major reasons I think we need to attend to this issue of transition. So whatever ideas you can supply us to improve that, and I'm not now talking about the VA, I'm talking about the Department of Defense. And I think that's where you can be very helpful to us.
I'm going to defer this to our VE&E Chairman, Jay Bowen.
Thank you, Commander, and thank you, Senator, for the question. You know, the question of the transitioning out for veterans or for active duty service members has been something of great concern for us. We're working with the transition assistance programs all around the country with all the military bases that we can get into to help them recognize that and to reformat some of their curriculum to ensure that these things are addressed. And wherever possible, we're getting more and more of our veterans and people like the American Legion into those programs so that we can help guide and steer them toward getting ready to change uniforms.
And do you agree with me that this is something we need to continue to work on?
Absolutely, yes, sir. This is something that we need to continue to work on. And as we learn more, then also readjust and revamp where it's needed.
Well, given my work on armed services, I hope you'll use me as a conduit to that other outfit over there across the river.
Would love to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Senator King. It is a fact that the transition seems to be a major issue in mental health. And to the military side of things, they're not looking to push people out of the military. They're looking to keep them. So to have that conversation about them leaving is not really, it's not really what they're about. But we certainly have to do a better job. And I think that if we can ever get it figured out, the transition piece tricked out, I think we'll see a lot of the mental health issues certainly recede significantly. I have one more question. I'm waiting for Chairman Boss to come back. Their votes are over in the House. But I want to talk, you brought up women's veterans, particularly from a mental health standpoint. The Deborah Sansom Act was passed. It was a bill that Senator Bozeman and I worked on pretty hard to get across the finish line to address the fastest growing veterans population that's out there, women. Could you just give us your view of how that bill is is the VA making the changes that need to address the health care needs that our women veterans have?
I'm going to defer again to Audrey James, VA&R Chairman.
You bet.
Thank you for that question, Senator. And yes, we do believe that the VA is moving forward. However, more needs to be done. Their barriers to gender-specific high-quality care include not identifying as a veteran, not being recognized by a veteran by VA employees, lack of awareness and understanding of VA healthcare benefits, and the perceptions that VA is an all-male healthcare system. We have to address that, and the way to address that is through training. And we have to make sure that VA is properly training those who are taking or who are coming into contact with our women veterans to ensure that they're being treated with the same care and dignity as any other veteran who enters the system.
Thank you very much for that answer. Chairman Bost is not going to be able to make it back. He apologizes for that. What I will say is this has been a great hearing, a little different than most of them we've had, because you guys actually got to see a little action up here, which is pretty cool. But I do want to thank the Legion for sharing your 2023 priorities with us. To all the Legionnaires in attendance this morning, thank you. Thank you for being here. We will be taking a break. We have a vote at 11:30 in the Senate, and since I'm chairing this bad boy, we're going to be coming back at 11:30, okay? So we will recess until 11:30, and then we'll be back to here for some more groups. Thank you all for what you do. God bless you.
we already did our open statement, but if you want to take time. Just take a little time. Okay, all right. We want to thank everyone we want to thank the second panel for being here. We're going to get started here in just a second. We thank you for putting up with us having votes and all the other things we have to do here. And we are joined by Ranking Member Takano, who is not here for an opening statement, but he'd like to make that now, and we're recognizing Ranking Member Takano.
Oh, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Bost, and I know Chairman Tester and Ranking Member Moran are joining us shortly. It's my honor and pleasure to once again join you and the other committee members of the House and Senate Committees on Veterans Affairs for the second of our 3 annual VSO hearings. Today's hearing features a diverse array of VSO partners representing a wide cross-section of the veterans community. Higher numbers of women, LGBTQ+, Black, Asian, Hispanic, and Native Americans are choosing to serve in our military than at any point in America's history. And today's panelists not only reflect that diversity, but embrace it. Because they know, as I do, there is strength in diversity, both for our armed forces and veteran communities and our country more broadly. For example, our first panelist, and I'm sorry I was not able to be here for the American Legion, is the nation's largest VSO representing over 2 million veterans from all walks of life, so I'm especially keen to gather from my staff the insights that they presented today. And as I said at yesterday's hearing, my priorities for this Congress center on making VA more accessible and responsive to all. And the unique perspective shared by National President Troyola and the rest of today's panel members, the second panel, will aid us in greatly achieving those goals. Veterans from underserved communities deserve to feel safe and welcome when they enter through VA's doors with outreach, programming, and solutions that address their unique needs. Additionally, VA must acknowledge the diversity of its workforce, a third of which includes veterans, and must address systemic discrimination in the workplace and ensure that VA is a safe, equitable environment for employees and veterans. We must ensure that health care and benefits are fairly and equitably distributed to all eligible veterans. And further, VA must remove barriers faced by aging and homeless veterans regarding access to health care and benefits, and continue the expansion of care and delivery benefits to those in rural areas. But it's important to remember that none of this can happen if we subject VA to the large and arbitrary budget cuts that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have endorsed. It is imperative that we do everything we can to protect VA's ability to deliver on the promise we have made to our veterans and avoid pitting veteran against veteran or veterans against other Americans in a scramble for a dwindling pool of resources. You, our panelists, will be key in how this all plays out. I look forward to hearing the testimony of all our panelists today, and I thank you for your continued advocacy and support for the veteran community. Thank you, and I yield back. Thank you, Chairman Bost, for that courtesy.
Thank you, Ranking Member Takano. So once again, we want to welcome to the second panel of witnesses. On our second panel, we have a multiple groups of veteran services organizations and advocacy organizations that represent and assist a diverse cross-section of veterans from across and around the country and around the world. So first of all, we want to start with Charlie Brown. Charlie is the national president of the Paralyzed Veterans of America. And Charlie, you're recognized for your opening testimony.
Thank you. Chairman Tester, Chairman Bost, and members of the committees, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today on behalf of tens of thousands of veterans with spinal cord injuries and disorders who heavily rely on the benefits and health care available through the Department of Veterans Affairs. My written statement addresses the full list of PVA's 2023 priorities. In the interest of time, I would like to focus on 2 critically important issues that Congress must address: protecting access to VA specialized health care systems and expanding access to the VA long-term services and supports. VA is the best health care provider for veterans with catastrophic disabilities. The Department's Spinal Cord and Injury Disorder, or SCID, system of care provides a coordinated lifelong continuum of services for paralyzed veterans. There is no comparable system in the private care. However, if the VA continues to woefully underfund the system and understaff facilities, the department's capacity to treat veterans will be diminished and could lead to the closure of facilities and services reductions. We are particularly concerned about the VA's current health workforce crisis. When I appeared before you last year, the SCID system of care was short 600 nurses. Today, that number is relatively unchanged. Staffing shortfalls have a direct impact on the SCID system. Due to an insufficient number of nurses, care at one of VA's SCID systems units was suspended in 2022, and veterans with acute SCID needs were admitted to non-SCID units. Other facilities capped admissions due to the insufficient number of SCID nurses and are still working to fill vacancies to meet the minimum requirements. We urge Congress to conduct oversight to ensure the VA is fully utilizing the authorities granted last year to hire additional medical professionals, particularly doctors and nurses, to meet the demand for services of the SCID system of care. Congress should also provide VA with more tools to compete for highly qualified medical professionals and support training for current and future VA clinicians, including passing the bipartisan VA Careers Act. The SCID system of care has also been affected by the design and construction delays inherent to the VA infrastructure project funding and delivery system. In reviewing VA's infrastructure, VA should place a great emphasis on funding facilities that support the types of services like SCID care, which the department uniquely provides. Greater investment in both SCID acute and long-term care would strengthen VA's specialty care services and ensure the future availability. The next issue I will address is the improved access to long-term services and supports. In order to be here today, I had the help from my paid caregiver. He helped me get dressed, get out of bed, and into my wheelchair. He helped me take my medicine. He helped me groom. My story is not unique. It's the story of Robert and Tammy and Josue, who are behind me. Without that care, we are stuck at home in bed. It is also the story of one PVA member in Minnesota. Because of this shortage of direct care workers, he is fortunate when he has someone come and get him out of bed and help him through his day. He regularly spends weekends in bed because no staff is available to assist him, and he is depressed, frustrated, and because he can't find the direct care he desperately needs. Another PVA member in Ohio is waiting for the Veteran-Directed Care Program to be available at that facility. Even if the program is available, veterans may not be aware or even given the opportunity to enroll. Although the VDC is available in my VA medical center, I was not made aware of this until last year. After several attempts to access the program, I was told that I had not been considered for it. Veterans should be given the opportunity and the choice to access the program if and when it is available. Another major issue is the cap on home care spending. VA is currently prohibited from spending on home care more than 65% of what it would cost if a veteran was to be placed in a nursing home. When VA reaches the cap, the department can either place the veteran into a facility at a much greater cost or rely on the veteran's caretakers, often family members, to bear the extra burden. Some service-disabled veterans are even forced to turn to the state's Medicare programs to receive the care they need. One veteran with a form of multiple sclerosis who is ventilator dependent and has other medical needs is on the verge of ending up in the facility. His family needs the VA to provide 8 hours of care a day for the weekdays, right? But the VA is only able to provide 16 hours per week due to the cost. Congress must allow the VA to cover the full cost of home-based care services and for those veterans, others like him, without exhausting their caregivers and leaving them struggling to cobble together the services and supports they need to stay home with their families. We urge Congress to pass the Elizabeth Dole Home and Community-Based Services for Veterans and Caregivers Act, as introduced, to improve VA home care for these veterans. Thank you again for the opportunity to share our views, your commitment to paralyzed veterans and their caregivers. I would be happy to answer questions you may have.
Thank you, Charlie Brown. There will be questions. Next up is Jared Lyon, National President and Chief Executive Officer of the Student Veterans of America. Jared, you have the floor.
Chairman Tester and Boss, Ranking Members Moran and Takano, and members of the committee. 2023 marks the 15th anniversary of Student Veterans of America. SVA was founded by a passionate group of post-9/11 veterans, many of whom had returned home from deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, only to find a lack of adequate services and support when they returned home. SVA chapters are the lifeblood of our mission, and many of our chapters began as local student veteran clubs, who first organized 15 years ago as a way to reconnect with those with similar lived experiences while advocating for benefits for all student veterans, military-connected students, family members, and survivors. SVA is committed to the empowerment of today's student veterans by advocating for their earned benefits, including disability and compensation, health care, as well as education benefits and employment programs. Since this is the first time that SVA chapter members, advisors, alumni supporters have been in a hearing in person since 2020, I would like to ask that if you are here with SVA today, to please stand or raise your hand to be recognized. Thank you all so much for being here. Over this past year, SVA chapter leaders have emerged from the pandemic. They have hosted career fairs, organized suicide awareness events, educated their campuses on issues affecting veterans, advocated for the creation of student veteran emergency funds, conducted food drives, mentored community youth, aided in the resettlement efforts of our Afghan refugees, and pushed for greater healthcare access, all to ensure that we meet student veterans where they are in their educational journey. All in all, these are incredible people doing amazing things. Before I continue, SVA would like to thank members of these committees for their dedication and perseverance on legislation that codified future emergency VA education protection, improved National Guard and Reserve members' federal protections when they are activated, and expanded VA Vet Centers eligibility to include student veterans. With the help of Congress, we can all embrace the idea that the GI Bill is the gateway to VA. For many veterans, the GI Bill is their first interaction with the VA, but it doesn't have to be their last. VA will welcome more veterans to its doors and outperform their expectations by delivering a top-of-the-line experience with the GI Bill first, laying the groundwork for future engagement across the entire scope of VA's programs and services. In my remaining time, I'll brief some of the most pressing issues that we hear from SVA community members. We encourage the committees to review our written testimony for a comprehensive list of our policy priorities. Even before the pandemic, SVA regularly heard from students that current MHA rates do not reflect the reality of their living situation, and many took out student loans just to make ends meet. Therefore, SVA urges Congress to review certain fundamental assumptions that are underlying MHA and include VRE, subsistence rates, break pay, overseas institutions, and online instruction. Repeatedly, SVA has heard from members of the National Guard and Reserve regarding the lack of parity to benefits and administrative issues such as completing coursework or exams that conflict with short-term military training and deployments. SVA encourages Congress to make every day in uniform count and coordinate with the VA, Department of Education, and Department of Defense to explore ways to reduce barriers so that military duty does not negatively impact academic progress. Access to VA health care for student veterans remains a top priority for SVA. The VA Vital Program is a joint effort between VHA and VBA that provides seamless access to VA healthcare services and on-campus clinical counseling through collaboration with local VA medical centers, the VBA, campus faculty and staff members, as well as community resources. SVA asks Congress to continue supporting VA healthcare and mental health services and hold VA accountable to ensure that those services are reaching student veterans through the expansion of the VA Vital Program. Next is the idea that financial aid is based, in part, on an applicant's income from the prior year. For our nation's newest veterans, those numbers reflect what they were paid while they were still in the military. As such, SVA asks Congress to explore ways that the VA and the Department of Education can work to modernize federal student financial aid to account for these unique circumstances by leveraging solutions such as notifying recently transitioned veterans about the professional judgment option, which allows them to appeal financial aid awards with their institutions as needed. Finally, SVA would like to highlight that the VA Vet Tech program has been extremely successful over the last 5 years. However, this well-received program will expire next year. SVA urges Congress to make VA Vet Tech permanent while embodying GAO's recent recommendations so that veterans can continue leveraging the program to find high-quality, well-paying jobs in the technology section. In conclusion, we would like to thank you for your time and attention and devotion to the cause of veterans in higher education. At Student Veterans of America, we know that investing in veterans is not only the right thing to do, but it means investing in the future of American leadership. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you for your statement, Jared, and as with your group and all, the written testimony will be looked at. Thank you for that. Next up is Jeremy Butler, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Iraq, Afghanistan Veterans of America. Jeremy, hope this is public information, will be departing IAVA soon. I just want to take a minute and say I appreciate the working relationship we've had during your tenure as Chief Executive Officer, and we look forward to continued great things from you, Jeremy.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Now it's a spoiler alert for my entire testimony. I was going to focus on that, but it's all right. You said it brilliantly, so I appreciate that. Chairman Tester, Chairman Bost, Ranking Member Moran, Ranking Member Takano, and members of the committees, on behalf of IAVA, thank you for the opportunity to share our views on our policy priorities for the 118th Congress. As mentioned, today is a bittersweet day for me because it is the last time that I will join you here as CEO of IAVA. However, I am excited because I'm honored to be joined by our IAVA staff, members who flew in from around the country to advocate on our priorities, and also by Allison Jaslow, who was announced on Monday as the next leader of IAVA, and one whom I know will carry our mission forward and build on the successes we've celebrated throughout the years. It has been an incredible honor to be a part of the IAVA team, and I want to take a moment to thank all of those who have supported us in our work. And we genuinely do have much to celebrate, but also still work to be done, and IAVA will continue to be ready to work with you and the administration to execute recently enacted legislation and to develop and pass new measures. With significant recent victories for IAVA-backed legislation addressing military toxic exposures, combating the suicide crisis, defending the GI Bill from abuse, and filling gaps in care for female veterans, what is needed from the 118th Congress is energetic oversight to ensure the proper and timely implementation of these new laws. IAVA commends the hard work and tough decision made by members of your committees and congressional leaders resulting in the passage of the PACT Act. We thank you for getting it done and for getting it done right. Secretary McDonough and the VA have done an incredible job informing veterans of their new benefits, but the DoD also has a substantial responsibility to ensure that those still on active duty, but who were exposed during our 20 years of war, are aware of the PACT Act and the dangers of toxic exposures. The VA must also reach out to Native American tribes, Native Hawaiians, and Alaskan Natives through the Indian Health Service, Bureau of Indian Affairs, Tribal Veteran Service Organizations, and other suitable organizations and agencies. Additionally, a concerted effort must be made to reach veterans throughout rural America, as they are often more disconnected than others. Sexual assault and related trauma remain a crisis in our military, and many of us worked for years for passage of the Military Justice and Increasing Prevention Act to make critical reforms to military law in the FY 22 and 23 NDAs. IAVA eagerly awaits the implementation of the sweeping new provisions and encourages strong bipartisan oversight to ensure that full intention of the legislation is met by DoD. More than 40,000 veterans are homeless on any given night, and approximately twice that many experience homelessness throughout the year. To combat this problem, IAVA worked closely with other VSOs to enact the Building Solutions for Veterans Experiencing Homelessness Act to permanently cut red tape on capital grants provided by VA for organizations assisting veterans experiencing homelessness. But more needs to be done, and IAVA strongly encourages oversight of VA and HUD homeless programs to ensure existing funds are effectively and fully utilized based on need, and ensure the VA provides technical assistance and adequate training to grant recipients who assist homeless veterans. The Deborah Sampson Act, developed to fill gaps in care for women veterans, became law in January 2021, but we remain frustrated with the slow rate of updates on its implementation and are seeking committee support in receiving a comprehensive written report on progress towards VA full implementation. Separate from this legislation, but also vital, is the need to change the VA motto to one that recognizes the service of all Americans who have served. Secretary McDonough pledged to make this important change, and IAVA would like to ensure that it is completed without further delay. For years, IAVA and our VSO partners have defended and strengthened the GI Bill. In 2021, we celebrated passage of legislation after many years of work to finally close the 90-10 loophole, and now IAVA calls on Congress to closely monitor the implementation of this legislation and ensure that veterans and military families are protected. As you know, and as we've discussed, the Major Ridge Star Act would end the unjust tax on the 42,000 retirees whose military careers were cut short due to combat-related injuries and allow them to collect the entirety of their earned benefits. IAVA strongly believes that DoD retirement pay and VA disability compensation are two separate benefits established by Congress with two different legislative intents. Receiving both benefits concurrently should never be considered double dipping, and no combat injured medical retiree should be subject to this unjust offset. Following the chaotic exit by the U.S. and our allies from Afghanistan in the summer of 2021, the U.S.-backed government essentially collapsed overnight, and America left behind nearly all of the Afghans who partnered with us during the war. To right this wrong, the Bipartisan Afghan Adjustment Act establishes a legal adjustment process for Afghan evacuees who have been resettled across the U.S. Although your committees do not have jurisdiction over the AAA, it is critically important for the veterans you serve to know that their advocates on Capitol Hill are working on their behalf to bring to safety those who had their backs in Afghanistan. 88% of IAVA members support the research of cannabis for medicinal purposes, and veterans consistently and passionately have communicated that cannabis offers effective help in tackling some of the most pressing injuries faced when returning from war. We thank Senators Tester and Sullivan and Representative Bergman and Correa for reintroducing the bipartisan and bicameral VA Medicinal Cannabis Research Act to increase the research, and we applaud the Senate VA Committee's passage of the bill from your panel last month. We encourage Congress to quickly pass it into law. Finally, I want to express our significant concern as we observe conflicts on Capitol Hill over the level and scope of federal government spending. Veterans and military families have sacrificed and are sacrificing as a direct result of our nation's national security needs, and political disagreements over spending should never result in diminished care and benefits for our community. We ask you to stand against any spending cuts impacting veterans and military families, or any effort that will make such cuts easier to enact. Wars are expensive, and the costs do not stop when the service members come home. Thank you for your time, your service to our veterans, and for giving me the honor to speak with you on behalf of IAVA. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Next up, we have James Hartzell, President of the National Association of State Directors of Veterans Affairs.
Hey, my Afghan brother took care of me here. So, thank you, Chairman Tester, Chairman Boss, Ranking Member Takano, and distinguished members of the Committees on Veterans Affairs. My name is James S. Hartzell. I'm the President of the National Association of State Directors of Veterans Affairs, known as NASDVA. I also have the honor of serving as the Executive Director of the Florida Department of Veterans Affairs. Joining me today is the former NASDVA President, Les Beavers, who currently serves as our association's Legislative Director. NASDVA was founded more than 75 years ago to bring together the state directors, commissioners, secretaries from all 50 states, U.S. territories, and the District of Columbia to encourage communication, facilitate discussion, and promote best practices in order to successfully advocate for our nation's veterans, their families, and their survivors. Our association's work is vital, and we're committed with passion and purpose to address these key issues for our respective veterans. State Departments of Veterans Affairs are comprehensive service providers, and we are prominent veteran advocates. We serve as the primary intersection on veterans issues between the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs and our respective state and territory governments, as well as with veteran service organizations, community partners, and nonprofit entities. We deliver efficient, effective, veteran-focused services, and we closely partner with the VA in outreach and advocacy for our 19 million veterans in our nation. The collaborative relationship between the VA and NASDVA was just reinforced with the renewal of a memorandum of agreement that I signed last week with VA Secretary Dennis McDonough at our NASDVA Midwinter Training Conference right here in D.C. At our conference last week, we were very encouraged and very motivated to hear Secretary McDonough tell us there is no more important partner to the VA than NASDVA. As an association, we applaud Congress's concerted efforts to improve VA funding for health care, benefits and claims appeals processing, and homeless veteran programs. NASDVA also recommends Congress renewed attention on VA's aging infrastructure, on caregiver support, and on women veterans issues. We support Congress's efforts to hold both the VA and Oracle Cerner fully accountable for evolutionary upgrades to the VA's electronic health record system. It's essential that VA address both current system challenges and also future EHR development. To support our veterans impacted by toxic exposure, NASDVA both applauds and fully supports the timely implementation of the PACT Act and accelerated hiring of VA staff to address the resulting increase in medical examination and associated claims. We also recommend continued emphasis by the VA to ensure veterans are provided timely community care referrals and appointments. Reimbursements to providers for community care services should also be prompt. In promoting our collective state and territories' veterans' suicide prevention efforts, NASDVA applauds the implementation of the Compact Act and recommends additional resources be provided through the Governor's Challenge and Mayor's Challenge on veterans' suicide prevention. NASDVA supports the VA as they seek to continue telehealth prescribing of controlled substances to ensure veterans retain access to critical treatments and healthcare professionals. For our nation's state veteran nursing homes, both NASDVA and the National Association of State Veteran Homes recommend a new grant per diem scale to address our chronic healthcare professional shortage. Both of our associations also support a funding increase of the VA's underfunded State Veterans Home Construction Grant Program. In addition, VA's current budget does not allow its National Cemetery Administration to establish new state or tribal cemeteries. We strongly recommend increasing funding support for both expansion and establishment cemetery projects. To serve all veterans, NASDVA applauds the recent MOU between the VA and Indian Health Service and supports the recent proposed rule by the VA waiving co-payments incurred for eligible American Indian and Alaska Native veterans. NASDVA commends VA's emphasis on ending homelessness among veterans, especially women veterans with children. And NASDVA recommends continued funding for specialized homeless programs and commends VA and HUD's increasing the number and value of HUD-VASH vouchers. Finally, it's a significant challenge for transitioning service members to connect with their earned state services, benefits, and support. And NASDVA recommends that all state departments of Veterans Affairs be included in the Department of Defense Transition Assistance Program and also be allowed to connect with service members who will be heading to our respective states and territories. Distinguished members, committees on the Veterans Affairs, both the House and Senate committees, we sincerely respect and appreciate the vital work and leadership you have done and that you continue to do to improve the well-being of our nation's veterans. I'd like to reemphasize, we are government-to-government partners and that we are second only to the United States Department of Veterans Affairs in delivery of earned benefits and services to those who served in the defense of our nation. With your help and your continued support, we ensure that our veterans and their needs are adequately resourced and remain a national priority. Thank you for letting us share our state and territory needs and priorities with the committees today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your statement, Mr. Hartzell. Up next is Sean Detweiler, Interim Director of the Black Veterans Empowerment Council.
Chairman Tester and Chairman Bose, Ranking Members Moran and Takano, members of the Senate and the House Veteran Affairs Committee. I am pleased to speak before the Joint Senate and House Veteran Affairs Committee hearing today on behalf of the Black Veterans Empowerment Council, Inc., BVEC. BVEC is a nonprofit organization registered in the state of Maryland, and I'm honored to be leading the re-energized evolution of our organization, executive team, staff, and volunteers to continue providing impact across the broader community with transparency. Currently, BVEC is working on comprehensive plans to strengthen both the collaboration and transformation of our efforts as we continue to shift longstanding racial inequities suffered by Black veterans in the United States through our nonpartisan coalition made up of national, state, local veteran service organizations, and the Black veterans community. BVEC is appreciative of the work that the SVAC and the HVAC have completed in the 117th Congress, and we look forward to our continued collaboration in the 118th Congress. We also look to continue advocating to advance sensible and sustainable legislative solutions affecting all veterans, including GI benefits, particularly underutilization of and inadequate access to benefits for Black and minority veterans and discharges for Blacks and minorities more broadly. As a host of factors complicate benefit utilization, BVEC supports the work of the Black Veteran-centered organizations in advancing research on racial disparities and access to veterans' benefits across the Department of Veteran Affairs. These findings reveal statistically significant racial disparities in disability grant rates and denials suffered by Black veterans and highlight a need to redress and reform. Economic. The Department of Defense and the federal agencies contracting the veteran-owned small business is one of the largest issues the veteran business owners face today. We know underserved communities are heavily recruited. Many Black veterans return to resource-poor neighborhoods and withstand frequent denials, deterrence, or misinformation on how to appropriately utilize the veterans' benefits they've earned. Startup capital for veteran-owned small business is critical. There are a number of regulations made by agencies that require significant upfront capital just to be registered to do business. It is cost prohibitive in a lot of cases for veterans to go into business within the DoD and the federal agencies. Housing, particularly significant and in some cases increased numbers of homelessness amongst veterans. To fulfill this commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, VA must also improve micro-targeting outreach across the Black veterans community. BVEC and its affiliate organizations stand willing to assist the VA leadership in this effort. The VA Housing Loan Forever Act of 2022 discussion draft from the 117th Congress. The BVEC supports this piece of legislation and looks to work with Congress on it. Enforcement. Many Black veterans hail from at-risk, low-income, and underserved communities, joining the military in the hopes of serving our nation, while seeking economic mobility and access to housing, education, and healthcare benefits often lacking in their respective environments. Unfortunately, a lack of effectiveness exists due to the speed of the agencies implementing this new legislation. Further, an issue lies on how the federal agencies and sub-agencies interpret and implement legislation intent without a streamlined process across other agencies and divisions of those agencies. A perfect example is Chairman Tester's quote from the U.S. Senate Committee of Veteran Affairs site, article dated November 30th, 2022. I'm disappointed VA hasn't implemented the law we passed 2 years ago to end co-pays for VA health care for Native veterans. Why is it taking so long? Black veterans are experiencing similar issues, and we would like to start working towards establishing a VA Advisory Committee on African American Affairs. I personally testified to Ranking Member Takano during the Veteran Voices of Color Roundtable of this need in July and September of 2020. We as the founders of BVEC did not do enough to pursue this effort in the 117th Congress. I asked the 118th Congress today to work with the BVEC on this advisory committee. As the work of the 118th Congress progresses, we understand that the country is at the nexus of multiple crises, real challenges around care for our veterans, global and national security threats, possible economic recession, and the tail end of a 2-year pandemic. Now more than ever, we must all work together to ensure the needs of veterans are being addressed during these difficult times. With that in mind, I and the BVEC stand ready and willing as partners in the journey towards sustainable, sensible solutions for veterans. I thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you for statement, Mr. Deadweiler. Next up is Jack McManus, National President of the Vietnam Veterans of America.
Yep. Good afternoon, Chairman Tester, Chairman Bost, members Takano and Moran. With me today are veteran advocacy champions from each one of your states. Not a mistake. We're very pleased to be here today to present the highlights of our legislative agenda, which has been presented to the committee, and it take me a week of Sundays to read it all. But we want to be able to transform and support our American veterans with effective policies, initiatives, programs, and benefits. And a little bit about VBA. VBA, Vietnam Veterans of America, is an organization that never should have had to come into existence. We shouldn't have existed at all. We came primarily due to the refusal of American society to recognize those of us who were served during the Vietnam War were just as much an American veteran as those from the previous generations that served, particularly World War II and Korea. Our war was unpopular to a majority of our citizens, including many who served during the Vietnam era. Instead of treating those who served during our period in a manner of previous generations with respect and dignity, Vietnam veterans were relegated to a lower class in our society. Not only was their service and sacrifice not recognized and honored by a grateful nation, but it was also seen as a mark against them. Made very, very difficult things like employment. It was just almost impossible during that period of time for veterans. Until we as a nation stopped trying to classify military veterans and their unique issues by the popularity of their tour of duty or time they served, or how we asked them to sacrifice themselves, our nation is only going to repeat what we Vietnam veterans experienced. We must stop categorizing veterans by their service, and then and only then will we stop pitting one group of veterans against another, as happened during and after the Vietnam War. An American veteran is an American veteran. regardless of how and when they served. That is why the biases that were created and why PTSD and substance abuse, toxic exposures, ailments from Agent Orange, and the high rates of joblessness, homelessness, suicide, and so many other veteran issues of our generation took decades to address. All right? As technology creates more sophisticated means of warfare, our future veterans will face physical and mental challenges that we couldn't imagine to understand today. Try to imagine our enemies weaponizing electromagnetic mind control and how our veterans will address the inevitable unknown maladies that associated with such a weapon. We've already seen some of this in our intelligence community, and they've even done that. There was a rather lengthy thing on the TV about how they were using that right on the grounds of the White House. So if we don't recognize military veteran only as an American veteran, then our country experienced by our generation upon their return, we cannot let that happen again. Veterans should never be the target of situations created by Congress and the administration who have jointly been unable for years, if not decades, to meet the federal government's obligation to pay the debt to those that have served. I joined the military to defend and uphold the Constitution, the same oath that each of you as sworn elected leaders are, and I call on each of you to back and defend the veterans, widows, and survivors from any attempt to take away their earned benefits. Being probably the senior person up here, I'm probably going to be in contempt of Congress, but we're going to try to continue this here. Our POW MIA issue is really our most solemn priority within the Vietnam Veterans of America. We have 1,581 unaccounted for American servicemen from our long ago war, and for the survivors, and for us and their survivors, the pace of recovery is unacceptable. In the past 3 years, as we reported, accounting 428 U.S. servicemen have been accounted for. Of this, only 5 are from the Vietnam War. We've attached with our priorities our white paper on aging veterans and the challenges that we have where we lack a clear and comprehensive roadmap to address the concerns that VA has and will continue to have, and we've not seen demonstrated meaningful progress on the help for the aging veterans. Our same concern is with the rural veterans, and we think that there are some programs that would absolutely help and continue to address that. That would be the increase in the availability of community-based care. I know that to some on the panel, that's a very, very important issue. We do not believe that providing community-based care should be used to dismantle the organized structure of the Veterans Health Administration, our hospitals and our CBOCs and our specialty, including our PTSD programs and our vet center programs. We also need to address the legacy of toxic exposures, all right? The PACT Act marks one of the greatest expansions of veterans' health care and benefits of a generation. That was an important victory, but we still have work to do making sure that the implementation is accomplished with congressional oversight, verifying the accountability on the regulatory and statutory sides. We're also have a particular interest to Vietnam Veterans of America is the implementation of the Toxic Exposure Research Act that was passed by the Congress of the United States and signed by the President. We are now asking that the chair appoint the ranking member, Senator Moran, who was the champion of that law, to hold oversight committee hearings, including with the Secretary of the VA as the star witness, to investigate what means and metrics he used that empowered him not to follow the law. Mr. Chairman, we do not seek another study. We would just appreciate your support in ensuring that the already agreed-upon study is conducted and that the VA reconsider their denial for further study of the much-needed intergenerational research and be in compliance with the law that was passed by this Congress and signed by the President. In the Public Law 1623, the Blue Water Vietnam Act of 2019, VA calls on Congress in the strongest terms to amend a public law to extend a nautical mile limitation sufficient to cover U.S. Navy and Marine Corps Vietnam veterans who were assigned to the Vietnam Theater of Combat Operations or who received the Vietnam Service Medal. The current law excludes veterans who served further beyond an arbitrary boundary of 12 miles seaward of the waters of Vietnam and Cambodia, but they were still exposed or potentially exposed to Agent Orange and suffer from its effects. Our Gulf War veterans deployed to Southwest during the Gulf Wars, Southwest Asia, during the Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm, were exposed to a long list of toxins and are still waiting for answers to their long-term effects. VA has an exceedingly high rate of Gulf War presumptive claims, 76% being undiagnosed or denied. VA's presumptive Gulf War claims adjudication policies, procedures, and training should be remedied to, and Gulf War veterans serving at the hands of the organization are supposed to help them, should be serviced more effectively. We have significant information on addressing the comprehensive assistance for family caregivers, and of which we support. We'd like to address homeless veterans, while we are very, very appreciative and happy that we've been able to decrease the number of older homeless veterans have increased. All right, the extreme shortage of affordable housing has helped create this crisis for older generation veterans. Tremendous strides have been made by the VA in addressing and providing the services, yet the problem exists, and it's a national disgrace that it continues to persist. It is especially disturbing that the number of older homeless veterans have been steadily increasing. We find that the same issue with homeless veterans carries over to the veteran suicide issue. 2 or 3 veteran suicides are over 55 years of age. 14 of 20 do not get care at the VA, so that it's not just a VA program, and the ability of the VA to touch some of these potential suicide victims.
Mr. McManus?
Yes.
I would ask you to wrap, because we're about, otherwise there will be contempt of Congress.
All right. So on the veteran suicide, we'll wrap up. We have one request that Congress enact a law that will make mandatory the insertion of a single question on a death certificate. Did the descendant ever serve in the armed Forces of the United States, so we can do some tracking. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have, and thank you very much.
You betcha. Thank you for your statement, Mr. McManus. Next up, we have Christopher Slowinski, National Executive Director of the Fleet Reserve Association. Christopher, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, Chairman Tester, ranking members Moran and Takano, and members of the committee. My name is Chris Slowinski. I'm the National Executive Director of the Fleet Reserve Association. I'm here today with FRA National President James Robbie Robbins Jr. from Orange Park, Florida, and FRA National Vice President John Hanzik from Bel Air Beach, Florida. We represent the concerns of the oldest sea service association that's been in service for over 98 years. As one of the leading supporters of the PACT Act that was enacted this past session of Congress, FRA is grateful for its passage. Military service can require service members to go places that may expose them to environmental hazards that cause illnesses and disease that cannot be diagnosed for years or even decades after their service. The PACT Act recognizes that fact. I want to thank Chairman Tester and the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee for allowing FRA to be one of the 3 associations to testify on the comprehensive veterans toxic exposure back in March of last year. The fiscal year 2023 Omnibus Appropriations Package also provides provisions of FRA-supported Veterans Prostate Cancer Treatment and Research Act. Prostate cancer is the #1 cancer diagnosed in the Veterans Health Administration. As I stated in my testimony this past March, I served on active duty in the Navy for 4 years. I worked as an aviation electronics technician. My primary duties were associated with being a final checker and troubleshooter on the flight deck of the USS Coral Sea. In September of 2021, I was diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer, which has metastasized to my bones and other areas. I do not have a family history of this cancer, but I've been very fortunate that I've received my treatment in the defense healthcare system. Walter Reed is currently in the process of transitioning to the new Genesis electronic healthcare system. So I'm having a firsthand observations of the changes that are taking place there. FRA appreciates both committees' oversights hearings on the electronic health record modernization at the VA. FRA is aware of the lingering issues related to the patient safety, training, employee morale, and several other deployment problems still exist, though progress is still being made. The VA first launched the new electronic health care system more than 25 months ago. The program was scheduled to expand in July of 2022 to the medical center in Boise, Idaho. The expansion was delayed. Oversight committees were told that the VA was using this pause to make system enhancements and to perform tests to ensure that the system is stable, resilient, and provides the capabilities VA employees and veterans need to improve access to quality care. Nevertheless, progress has occurred since VA joined with DoD in the joint contract to modernize its EHR system in 2017 with the Electronic Healthcare Transparency Act, which requires VA to submit to Congress quarterly reports that evaluate the performance of those records. FRA believes congressional oversight of the ongoing implementation of the VA technology upgrades is vital to ensuring improvements to the system. FRA wants to ensure adequate funding and oversight for DoD and VA healthcare resources, delivering seamless, cost-effective, quality services to personnel wounded in combat and other veterans and their families. The cost and the long time for implementation notwithstanding, FRA believes there is a tremendous opportunity for the 2 departments using the same electronic health records. We are all poor historians of our healthcare without the EHR. I want to thank the committee for my opportunity to speak, and I await your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Slawinski. Appreciate your statement. Next up is Angela Pratt, co-chair of the Veterans Committee for the National Congress of American Indians.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Tester, Ranking Member Moran, Chairman Boss, and Ranking Member Takano, and to all the members of the Senate and House Veterans Affairs Committees. My name is Angela Pratt, and I'm a member of the Osage Nation of Oklahoma. I was a member of the Osage Nation Congress from July 2014 until July 2022, and for 4 of those years, I presided as the Speaker of Congress. I'm a proud Army veteran, Hua. I'm a longtime member of the American Legion, post 198, and as noted earlier, my dues are also paid up for life. So I just wanted to report that as well. And I've dedicated many years to assisting with veterans organizations' issues and efforts. Also in November 2021, I was elected to serve on the first ever Veterans Affairs Advisory Committee on Tribal and Indian Affairs. I thank you for that legislation. On behalf of the National Congress of American Indians and NCAI's Veterans Committee that I co-chair, I want to thank you for this opportunity to provide testimony on issues affecting Native Americans. And for the record, as I just mentioned, the National Congress of American Indians Veterans Committee that I co-chair, as you may be aware, NCAI was founded nearly 80 years ago and is the oldest, largest, and most representative American Indian and Alaskan Native organization serving the broad interests of tribal governments and communities. On behalf of NCAI, I want to thank you for letting me speak today. And also, I would like to note that per capita, Native people serve at a higher rate in the armed forces than any other group of Americans, and that they've served in all the nation's wars since the Revolutionary War. Native veterans continued their service in our nation's wars long before they were recognized as United States citizens and before they had the right to vote. Given my time, but submitted for the full testimony for the record, I'm going to focus on 3 areas that are priorities of the NCAI Veterans Committee, which are housing, health, and data. As a general matter, housing infrastructure in Indian country continues to lag behind the rest of the United States. And despite the service they provide to our country, homelessness and housing insecurity remains a major concern for our Native veterans. While data is scarce, and that's something I will return to momentarily, at least one study found that Native veterans made up 19% of all homeless veterans in the study sample, making the Native veteran homeless rate almost 10 times their representation in the general population. Another study indicated that Native veterans living in poverty were twice as likely to be homeless than their other non-veteran Native Americans. A simple but critically important step to combat this issue is to reauthorize and make permanent the Native American Housing Assistance and Self-Determination Act. NAHASDA has successfully been used by tribal nations across the country to focus on the specific housing needs in their own communities. However, NAHASDA expired 10 years ago, and we cannot afford to let this critical legislation go unauthorized any longer. Reauthorizing NAHASDA will also help Native veterans struggling with homelessness by improving the Veterans Affairs Supportive Housing, or the HUD-VASH program. This program has been a nationwide success because it combines rental assistance, case management, and clinical services for at-risk and homeless veterans. Unfortunately, this program is not fully available to Native veterans living on tribal lands. NCAI also urges congressional passage of the Native American Direct Loan Improvement Act of 2023, which among other things would also allow veterans who have built homes with other sources of construction financing to still use NADL as permanent financing and thus improve housing opportunities for Native veterans. Turning to Native veteran health care, I want to start by noting that obtaining health care for Native veterans often means navigating both the VA and the IHS, which is the Indian Health Service. The primary health care provider in most Native communities and for many of our Native veterans is IHS. Thus, one mechanism for improving the health of Native veterans is to improve the IHS system, which has long been woefully underfunded. And even though advanced appropriations for IHS passed at the end of the 117th Congress, which is something that NCAI and all of Indian country applauds, there is more to do. While historic, the advance appropriation for IHS is far from perfect, and inclusion of advance appropriations each year is not, as of yet, guaranteed. We owe it to our veterans to fight for culturally competent, delivered care closer to home. Congress must expand and sustain advance appropriations for the IHS funds until funds are mandatory for IHS. With my final moments, I would want to return to the issue of data. While I've highlighted two critical issues, housing and health, impacting Native veterans today, the fact is that data on Native veteran housing, health, and a host of other issues is scarce or more often than not, non-existent. This lack of data all too often makes Native veterans and their concerns invisible. There is an urgent need for accurate data concerning Native veterans in order to develop meaningful policy solutions that will address Native veterans' day-to-day concerns. This data, which is necessary, must be collected in collaboration with tribal nations, must respect privacy concerns, and must be shared with tribal nations who are generally in the best position to address the needs of their community members. I would like to conclude by once again thanking this committee for holding this hearing and allowing me to bring attention to Native veterans and the challenges they face in their lives. Our Native veterans, like all veterans, have given up their time, their health, and in many cases, their lives to protect this country. For those who have served and are still with us, it is imperative that we give them everything they need to thrive. Thank you again for this opportunity to speak, and I look forward to addressing any questions that you may have.
Thank you for your statement, Ms. Pratt. Last but not least, we have Roy Robinson, President of the National Guard Association of the United States. Roy, you have the floor.
Chairman Tester, Ranking Member Moran, Ranking Member Takano, and other distinguished members of the Senate and House committees, on behalf of the almost 45,000 members of the National Guard Association of the United States and nearly 450,000 soldiers and airmen of the National Guard, we deeply appreciate this opportunity. We also thank you for your tireless oversight to ensure accountability and improve services to our nation's veterans and their families. The combined efforts of your committees have advanced critical policies which directly impacted the National Guard, and I thank you for that hard work. From passing the PACT Act to expanding and improving access to mental health care, we continue to make progress toward enhancing the quality of life for our military and veterans. The operational tempo for the National Guard has increased significantly over the past 20 years, and even more so in the last 3. In addition to overseas deployments alongside the active component, the National Guard is there for our communities during the greatest times of needs. Whether it be wildfires in California, flooding in Louisiana, or most recently, shooting down unidentified objects threatening our national security. Our service members are always ready. In my testimony, I'd like to focus on 3 specific areas key to recruiting and retaining a National Guard force that remains prepared to protect our nation: consistent access to medical coverage, incentives for civilian employment, and increased benefit parity. Our number 1 priority for the 118th Congress is the Health Care for Our Troops Act, which will be reintroduced soon in both the House and the Senate. I ask that your committees do all you can to support this critical need. Affording zero-cost TRICARE coverage will dramatically increase readiness, solve turbulence moving on and off health plans, and ultimately save money. Guard and Reserve units must be ready at a moment's notice, just as the active component. It's imperative that all service members have access to the health care needed to meet medical deployability requirements. It's unthinkable that an estimated 60,000 Guard members currently do not have health care coverage. These are the same soldiers and airmen we send into communities to administer COVID testing and vaccinations. The same soldiers and airmen we sent down to Puerto Rico to help with hurricane aftermath, often serving alongside active component members who did have health care coverage. This is unacceptable. The benefits of zero-cost TRICARE extend beyond medical readiness. As a key retention policy, this will help us keep a manned and ready force under the all-volunteer force construct. Preventive care throughout our service members' careers will also reduce medical expenditures when transitioning from drilling guardsman to veteran. Furthermore, consistent medical coverage will allow those within our ranks to consistently have mental health care. I cannot think of any better way to truly put our service members first. Lastly, This is a significant employer benefit. When a company knows a service member won't require health insurance coverage, it will be that extra incentive needed to make the hire. Time away from civilian careers continues to increase, and we must find a way to better encourage employers. Without improved incentives, I worry companies will start to choose equally qualified non-military candidates over our service members. This will revolutionize how health care is delivered to our soldiers and airmen. I am convinced it will not only provide better health results, but will prove cost advantageous in the long run. The fact that we have men and women serving this nation in uniform who do not have medical coverage is a travesty, and we need to do better. Again, I ask for each of your support on the Health Care for Our Troops Act. Strengthening service member civilian employment. As mentioned, the recent increase of the citizen soldier expectations have expanded well beyond the traditional 39-day annual training structure. While I cannot anticipate future operational needs, it is clear that the era of 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks a year is over. In the wake of this new reality, we ask the committee support continued efforts to assist reserve component service members and their employers. Specifically, we encourage the reintroduction and passage of the Recruit Act. This bill authorizes an annual tax credit for small business employers who employ Guard and Reserve members and would go a long way towards supporting our communities. In August, we continuously strive for benefit parity on all fronts. For the past several years, I've asked for your assistance in correcting numerous benefits not afforded to our members. Both the Forever GI Bill and the FY18 NDAA made advancements to close that gap. Now, Guardsmen and Reservists are eligible for nearly all the same benefits as the active component, including tuition assistance, transitional health care access, and post-9/11 GI Bill benefits. However, there's still more work to be done. Fortunately, Congress has made great progress towards correcting this. During the 117th, the House passed H.R. 1836, Guard and Reserve GI Bill Parity Act. The bill counted all days in service, including weekend drills, annual training, and specific state active duties, such as 502F, toward the post-9/11 GI Bill. It's a fantastic step forward. We strongly encourage the reintroduction of this bill in the 118th Congress. I thank you again for allowing August to testify. Your efforts are critical to the well-being of our service members and the success of our National Guard. I look forward to continuing our work together and sincerely appreciate the steadfast leadership from the members and their staffers in advocating for the men and women of the National Guard.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Robinson, and I want to thank you all for your testimony today. I appreciate it. I'm going to start with the questions. Questions will be 3 minutes. VA has about $88 billion in infrastructure needs out there. We're putting about $5 billion towards that. At least that's what it was last year. That's not enough. Your testimony, Mr. Brown, talks about the highlights for need for new and modernized facilities, particularly for spinal cord injuries and long-term care, and the list goes on. Are you familiar with the bill that I've got, Build for Veterans Act, which...
Personally, I'm not, but I do have my government relations.
Okay, good. So what this does, it's going to direct the VA to improve how it plans and delivers construction projects while it strengthens Congress's ability for oversight. So, Mr. Brown, or who you want to defer it to, how would this legislation speed up the delivery of new facilities for veterans with spinal cord injuries or diseases?
Actually, I have a talking point right here in front of me. Currently, there are 14 SCI centers that use 4 bedrooms. If a veteran comes in and has a particular abnormality or disease or comorbidity, they cannot put another patient in that room. That means 3 veterans cannot get the care they need in that room. So with these bills and I believe what you're introducing will create single rooms for these veterans, and we'll be able to create proper care for the veterans when they get to the hospital. They won't be waiting for a bed to be available because one veteran takes up 4 spaces.
Appreciate that answer, Mr. Brown. Cannabis has been a big issue for quite a while. Cannabis use among veterans continues to rise, especially amongst Iraq, Afghanistan vets. Despite the continued increase use as an alternative treatment for veterans, we still don't fully understand the impacts of cannabis use. Mr. Butler, do you support VA-led research into the effects of cannabis use on veterans?
Absolutely, yes, sir. We've been pushing for this for years. It's frankly, what you just said is exactly right. At a minimum, VA should be doing research. I can't even keep up with the number of states that are now have legal use of medicinal cannabis. It's well above 33, I think, with the last elections increased beyond that. At a minimum, VA should be doing this research so that we can understand just how effective it very much seems to be for treating many of the injuries that our era of veterans have. Research should be a no-brainer, but yet for years we've been getting pushback on that. So we certainly hope that this is the year we can change that.
Senator Moran and I do too, because we have a bill to do exactly that. And with that, I'll turn it to Senator Moran.
Chairman, thank you. Thank you all for your presence here today. I walked in at the right moment, Mr. President, Mr. McManus. Thank you for your comments about the consequences of toxic exposure to following generations to our veterans. This issue came to my attention at a Vietnam Veterans National Conference on the topic in Wichita, Kansas, now a number of years ago. I'm pleased that Senator Blumenthal and I were able to get the Toxic Exposure Research Act signed into law, but we've learned from the VA and the national academies that there's still significant challenges to research the health effects of toxic exposure on veterans' descendants, and I will use this opportunity to say I want to work with you and VVA and others to make sure that we accomplish that goal of science and medicine coming together to tell us what the truth is. Mr. Hartzell, I could not agree more with your statement about, your written statement about the importance of the VA processing referrals for care in the community in a timely manner. We've been working to get this accomplished, starting with just when does the clock begin to run so that we can determine how long that period of time is, and even that has been a challenge in solving. Can you elaborate on the frustrations that you hear from veterans across the country and in our states about the VA's failure to connect them with community care in a timely manner, and give us recommendations you may have for how to improve that process?
Thank you for the question, Ranking Member Moran. Yes, veterans are frustrated when we need care, we need medical care, and we go to our doctor, and our doctor tells us we're going to refer you. That's great news. We're going to send you to a specialist, someone really good in the community. I've personally experienced this last year myself, and I was very excited because I get great care from the VA. They give me great care at my clinics, at my hospitals, in James Haley down in Tampa. But there was a procedure or a test they needed to run, so they asked me to go to community care, another great hospital that's top-notch in our Tampa Bay area. Retired Marine two-star general, 37 years, president of National Association of State Veteran Directors, executive director of Florida's Department of Veterans Affairs. It took me months and months to get that test done. It was frustrating. I personally experienced this. So just put that plus the 1.5 million veterans that I have in Florida. We hear this all the time. When they do get the care in the community, we're very happy. And they're very thankful for the community care. So the timeliness of it, the working of it, and again, it's a process. It's a business process. I understand that. So we applaud the VA's great efforts to make it better, to work on it. We personally talked to the leadership of the VA about everything that they're doing to make it work better. But a lot of times it's the human factor. The process is in place, but it's the human factor, those phone calls and the connecting. And it's hard to connect with people, especially an 87-year-old Marine veteran like my father was. You know, it's a different way to communicate to him about community care and making that access than my 36-year-old Marine son. You know, different way to communicate to him. So I understand the VA has a lot of work to do on this, and we applaud their efforts on it. But we, as a national association, all 50 states and the territories in our district, we will do everything we can at our state and territory levels to reinforce their work on that, because it's critical.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Moran. Ranking Member Takano.
Thank you, Chairman Tester. You know, the budget cuts endorsed by some of my colleagues at the beginning of this Congress represent a nearly $31 billion cut to veterans programs. I'm talking about the talk about keeping to the 2022 spending limits. And since then, under pressure from the President of the United States and his own party, the Speaker of the House has declared that the DoD budget and Social Security and Medicare should be held harmless in any potential austerity measures. But veterans programs have not been extended this very same courtesy. So once again, it appears that veterans will be asked to sacrifice on behalf of the nation, in this case, their hard-earned health care and benefits. Mr. Butler, can you elaborate on IAVA's position with respect to VA budget cuts? What would a cut of that size mean for your members and the services they utilize at VA?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. I think we can all agree that the government can do a better job managing its finances. I think that's an agreement. Where we have an issue is when there are proposals to cut back on care and support for veterans who have earned these benefits. At the end of the day, we need to keep our promises. In the last testimony, there was a lot of discussion about keeping promises, and that's really what we're talking about, is making sure that those things that over 20 years of war, when funding flew very freely, there was very little efforts to finance these things, and to now have to turn around and say, we're going to correct those errors on the backs of those who raise their right hand to volunteer to fight these wars, is where we get very frustrated.
Well, thank you. Quickly, Mr. Brown, could you tell us what it would mean to paralyzed veterans of America?
I ask you all to take a look behind me. These veterans that receive their specialty care through the VA, that's not found in the community anywhere. The care and continuing care we receive, you're going to tell them, we're sorry, we can't fund the care you deserve or you earned? What are they going to do? Where do we go? Look at all the other veterans in this community out here. They feel the same way. It's not just for PVA, it's for all veterans. You're cutting the care, the drastic care that we need through the VA. You can't do that.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. By a show of hands, who on this panel would agree that slashing tens of billions of dollars from VA programs and services to veterans is a good idea? Raise your hand. I dare you. So let the record show that no one, not a single organization testifying here today, raised their hand in support of these disastrous proposed budget cuts. It is imperative that we hold the line on VA's budget so that veterans are not once again left fighting each other or the general public for benefits they have earned and undoubtedly deserve. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ranking Member Takano. Next, we have Congressman Rosendale.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you all the witnesses for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us here today. It's a lot to get here, and it's a lot to sit before everyone and share your stories. So it's important for everyone, not just in this room, but across the nation to be able to hear that. And we are trying to make sure that we not only provide the proper funding, but we provide it in the right areas. I think that is also another point that needs to be made. Your testimonies and commitment to the veterans is essential as we continue our work. We go through the 118th Congress. Mr. Lyon, I'm going to start with you. Thank you for sharing all the stories about student veterans of America's 1,600 chapters worldwide and the important work that each of the chapters is doing in its community. Can you elaborate, please, for me, on the importance and the contribution of student veterans to their college community, in addition to the financial benefit that they happen to bring to each educational facility?
Yes, sir, and thank you so much for the question. When you look at today's student veterans, you're looking at one of the most representative and inclusive populations of any students on a campus, let alone add to that the real-world experience that they've had before they've pursued their educational journey. Many of us have put our lives on hold to serve first, and then when we return home, have the opportunity to pursue our education. We bring leadership to the classroom, we bring leadership to group projects, we bring leadership through campus organizations to do something that I think is very important and that we have an opportunity, dare say, a responsibility to do. 1 in 3 college students does not themselves know a veteran. That means no one in their family served, likely no one in their neighborhood served. That notwithstanding, today's student veterans have the opportunity to help bridge the civilian and military divide through their integration on campus and their inclusion in every aspect and policy that the university upholds.
So would it be fair to say that they oftentimes act as mentors for the younger, more inexperienced students that happen to be walking around campus that don't have quite the life skills that you do?
We are the big sisters and brothers on that campus, yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yesterday, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments over President Biden's unilateral decision to cancel student loans. The debt forgiveness plan will cost over $400 billion. Besides the massive cost, Biden's actions, quite frankly, are a disgrace to the veterans that are sitting in this room and are serving across the nation. Mr. Ryan, how many more veterans do you think could expand or complete their educational or other vocational training opportunities with access to an additional $400 billion, which is greater than the entire annual budget of the Veterans Administration?
So it's a complex question, and when we look at today's student veterans, you're looking at nearly just over 70% of the transitioning force is in a college classroom within 7 months of returning home. So, by that math alone, you'd say at least 30% of veterans that are transitioning and not pursuing it. But debt is a hard and complex thing because student veterans, despite having the GI Bill and full access, are still graduating with an average of $27,000 in student loans. We have to get better at the entire and complex system.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, I would yield back.
Thank you, Congressman. Next up, we have Representative Cherfilius. Sorry about that, McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question is for Mr. James Hartzell from my fellow Floridian. Many veterans wish to age in place but do not understand how to access the VA benefits and programs that would empower them or are unaware of what services are available to them based on their circumstances. While the VA has a suite of benefits available to aging veterans, veterans face many issues when accessing these benefits. How can the VA reach out to the aging veterans so that they can access their VA benefits and health care?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. I appreciate it. And yes, we are fellow Floridians. Thank you. We work very closely as an association, our 50 states and territories and the District of Columbia, with the veterans, US VA, I call it Big VA, US Department of Veterans Affairs, in communicating the need and the opportunity for benefits for those who served our nation. They are doing a good job. The great job could be done, and we could reinforce it in the states and territories, I think, in a ad campaign. You asked for a question. So this is my personal opinion, some that we also are pursuing in my state. But we're looking at doing a public awareness campaign for veterans. A lot of those older veterans you're talking about, those elderly veterans, a lot of them still watch TV, and they look at TV. So if they saw that commercial, instead of some of the commercials we talked about earlier on TV all the time, if they saw a commercial about what's available and they see people getting those kind of events from the Veterans Affairs Administration, that would help, in my opinion. And we would support that in our states and territories, an opportunity to reinforce their success in that.
Thank you so much for your answer. My next one is for Mr. Sean Deadweiler. Mr. Sean Deadweiler, the chief goal of the BVEC is to shift longstanding racial inequalities suffered by Black veterans in the United States. Since BVEC's inception, the organization has grown to include 15+ organizations representing over 20,000 members. As it relates to receiving and applying for health care benefits in the VA, what issues have your members come across?
It's a good question, Congresswoman. I'm new to the seat, but if I had to tell you a personal story on it, Black veterans, when they go to access benefits, are denied regularly. The first try, the second try. We are then told to go meet with VSOs and lawyers in order to get those benefits. I think we need to do some different things and some studies on how to get the VBA more involved in helping veterans. I give you a personal story. I have a veteran right now that's 82 years old, just went through diaphragm surgery. He's 160% disabled, living alone, widowed. Doctor fills out his aid in attendance. It's now 6 months and he's still living in that house by himself and hasn't gotten that benefit. So we can do a better job.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Next, we have Representative Van Orden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for coming here today. I really appreciate it. We have veterans from the Vietnam War here. We've got veterans that served in the 80s and 90s who really trained for combat. We've got our post 9/11 guys here, and Eli, my buddy here, is a Navy SEAL, and so is Morgan, and so is I. We have multiple combat tours, and I really want you guys to understand something, that we have multiple generations concurrently of veterans at all times. And what binds us together collectively, other than the love of our nation, is really your organizations. And you have a tremendous responsibility to make sure that I'm staring right at you, General, and I'm going to say it, us younger folks get to hang out with you guys. And the way that we become whole again is by sharing our experiences together, and I truly understand that. And then, Mr. Chairman, I just want to take 1 second here to recognize Mr. Josh Jones. Will you stand up, please? This is Josh Jones. He's the Student of the Year. Well done. You guys have no idea how painful that was for me because I'm in the Navy and you were not. And you are also a Flatlander from Illinois and I'm from Wisconsin. But you keep up the good work, young man, you hear me? Hey, I chair the subcommittee that's responsible for veterans education, homelessness, and the transition from active duty to becoming a veteran. So, Mr. Lyon, I want to ask you a question, man. My concern is that my primary legislative priority is that transition period because that's when, unfortunately, we have a lot of veterans that make a permanent or take a permanent solution to a temporary problem and commit suicide. It's terrible. So I want to know, have you been invited by the Department of Defense or the Veterans Administration to participate in the TAP process?
Yes.
Okay, what type of participation do you guys have?
We got a variety of participation. So we're often invited to observe and provide recommendations. So this is the easiest way to answer that.
Okay, is it a formal programmatic thing or is it ad hoc?
Both, formal programmatic and ad hoc.
Okay, I want to talk to you guys again when we get out here. I want to make sure that this is included in that because
I would absolutely love to do that.
Okay, I want to make sure that when our veterans, people don't understand who haven't served that on a Monday you're an active duty service member, on a Tuesday you're a veteran. And that transition period, you go from wearing a uniform, having a purpose, driving life. They say twice the husband, half the paycheck, let's be honest. So that's a Navy wife out there that just laughed. So all these things are dramatic, and that's why our folks, make some bad decisions. So I want to make sure that you are included in this process formally. So thank you very much, and sir, with that, I yield back.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Congressman. Representative Pappas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank all of the veteran service organizations that are represented here for your advocacy. And to all of our veterans in the room, I'm grateful for your service. Mr. Brown, maybe I could ask a question of you. I had some folks from PVA in my office earlier today. Message was well received, and they were great advocates, and we appreciate what your organization does. I want to ask about the disparity between the rate of dependency and indemnity compensation at VA for surviving dependents and other comparable government benefit programs, with DIC payments being markedly lower. I'm wondering if you have some thoughts on those DIC payments, if you have any recommendations on what an appropriate base rate could be, and whether or not an increase would help survivors.
Apologize, but I guess my obvious answer is of course it would help. I mean, you look at an ALS patient in the VA, they're automatic 100%. They very rarely make 3 years of their life. In order to get the DIC kicker, they have to go 8 years. That right there alone is just an obvious answer to say, yes, that would make a huge difference in the life of a spouse. Sorry, that's obvious answer right there. Everything will make a difference in spouses. You go from, on average, around $10,000 a month for our compensation, and when we pass away, our spouses barely get $1,200. How do they survive after that? Sorry.
No, thanks for the response. And I'm the ranking member on the Disability Assistance and Memorial Affairs Subcommittee in the House, so we look forward to staying in touch on that issue. And maybe, Mr. Butler, I could turn to you next and just kind of build off that. Under existing law, a surviving spouse loses their DIC benefit if they remarry before age 55. But surviving spouses of active duty service members and veterans are more likely to be widowed at a younger age than other professions. And so on average, the wait period to maintain eligibility for surviving spouses is longer for survivors of other federal benefit programs. So I'm wondering if Congress should be working to address this, if you have any thoughts on that or the DIC issue generally.
Absolutely. I'll keep it short and sweet and say yes, 100%. It's one of those things that, I hope was not an intentional slight, but is definitely an area where there is very much needed reform.
Well, thank you. Once again, we look forward to working with all of you collaboratively. We thank you for your service. I yield back my time.
Thank you, Congressman. Representative Luttrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to make a statement to the panel and to all the veterans in the crowd today that understand that when it comes to our electronic health records, we are doing everything we can to make that our primary effort. And and unfortunately, as you all know, the government works in silos. Sharing data, sharing information is just, it's almost amendment to the Constitution. But being veterans ourselves, also understand that we are our country's most precious assets. And to lose any of that data to nefarious acts is something that we're working hard to prevent. And I understand the frustrations when it comes to because data sharing, information sharing creates results. Results moves down and inside the organizations, which helps us long term. So I wanted you to hear me say that as a new member to the Veterans Affairs, which I fought to get on specifically for that reason. To the general, I have a quick question for you. You mentioned that the transition from guard to active, and I know that goes back and forth, and you mentioned cost and how much cost that would save. Can you provide us those numbers so we can see what you're talking about? I don't have those numbers specifically, and you may not have them with you now, but that's something that I would like to see.
We will, and it's in reference to the cost associated with the readiness part of that medical. We can get that for you.
Okay, I'd appreciate that. And Ms. Pratt, thank you for being here. I actually represent the Alabama Coshada tribe, and please understand that this translates across to our Vietnam veterans, to our black veterans, to our veterans in general. But my question for you is, because I served alongside Native Americans out of the Crow reservations in the SEAL teams, and unfortunately, I lost him, and I was able to go up to the reservation and be a part of the service and be a part of the tribe for that short period of time. What I'm having trouble with, and even with the homeless veterans inside the reservations, is the culture prevents me from coming in because, number one, I am an outsider, and number two, I represent the government. And I'd love to have a follow-on. This may be a lengthy conversation, but when I have the conversations with our tribal elders and our tribal leadership on how we can assist not only our veterans but the tribes in general, they're almost reluctant to have me come in because of my representation at the federal level. Are you seeing that? Are you hearing that? Or if so, how do I crack that nut?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. And that is. Yes, it's a very long conversation to have, and it's been ongoing for quite some time. And that is what we are asking for in so many aspects of dealing with Native veterans. And we heard the Legion speak earlier, and we know veterans want to speak to veterans. Having that relationship, and tribal veterans want to speak to tribal veterans, and that's why we're pushing for tribal veteran service officers and cultural competency in all that we do, whether it be healthcare, mental health care. And so that's, I agree, and that's where we're at. So many things there has been a lot of progress, legislative progress, and I thank you all for being a part of that. So much has happened just even in the last 3 years, 5 years, and so I really appreciate that. But we have to be talking, we have to be communicating, we have to be trying to build that relationship between the VA, between the government and tribal nations, and that's why we have to speak out. So I would suggest that you continue to show up, continue to reach out to them, continue to try to build that bridge, because we have a long history of being invisible and not counted. And that's the one thing I spoke on is data. We are still being considered other. As the indigenous peoples of this land, we're still being counted as other, or checking the box other, or something else. And so we need to know our own data. We need to know our own, what's happening across, because we're talking about over 500 tribes that we're dealing with and have needs. And so I would definitely say that all of us have a lot of work to do in continuing to build that bridge.
Okay, let's have a follow-on, because I know my time's up, sir. Because if the tribes if they're siloed themselves, I don't like the Army, right? I'm a Navy guy, so I don't talk to the Army.
We're done here.
You know what I mean? I was just curious. Again, follow on. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you.
Representative Crane.
Well, it is a pleasure to be here today. I'm just going to ask this question real quick. Is it cold in here, or is it just because I'm from? Is it just because I'm from Arizona? All right. It is a little chilly. It is a little chilly. My question today is for Mr. Butler and Mr. Hartzell. If you guys could maybe take a minute each. You know, I have heard many issues from veterans in my district about issues that they have with the VA getting health care in a prompt and sometimes professional manner. And I do like to see veterans have options out in town. And I know some of the legislation that's been passed, like the Mission Act, giving veterans access to private civilian health care out in town, I think can be a very good thing. What have you guys experienced, and I'm asking you because I see you guys as experts, what have you guys experienced with the veterans? Why are you guys laughing out there about that?
That's what I just asked. I turned around. What is that? Sorry.
What have you guys experienced in your organizations and with those that you represent when looking at whether or not the vets under your umbrellas are able to get out in town quickly, especially those that are dealing with, you know, sometimes very serious suicidal type issues?
Great, thank you for the question, sir. Yeah, so very briefly, we do surveys regularly of our members, and one thing that we hear overwhelmingly, and I think this is echoed around the line, is our members love the care that they get at the VA. They're sometimes, though, frustrated that they can't get it as quickly as they want or at the pace that they need. So a short answer to a somewhat complicated question, we support the use of community care, but at the end of the day, we feel that it should be used as a bridge to improving the VA so that we can get veterans into the VA, so that we can get veterans who are maybe frustrated, have had bad experiences with the VA, get them the care that they need, but do the best that we can to get them back in the system. So I see the Mission Act and community care as a bridge to improving VA care so that we can get the veterans back in.
Thank you.
And thank you for your service and sacrifice as a Navy SEAL, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
I echo exactly what he just said. From our association, again, I speak for 50 voices plus 5 territories in a district. But the issue is awareness. If the veteran's not aware, if the veteran's family members aren't aware that care is available. So if we don't get through that hurdle, it doesn't matter if it's too long of a care, you can't, all that. You need awareness first. And then once you have the awareness that care is available, that we can help you with whatever issue you have, veteran, or family members of veterans, then what do you do with that information? What's the process? So that's an education. So there's a multi-level layer of things that need to take place here. And then where the frustration typically comes in is with the follow-through. It's the access to the care. Once you understand it, once you're aware of it, once you have the information, and that's why we're working with the VA, federal VA, to make it more aware and have better understanding of the process, because our veterans do deserve and they need that care. It's a great community care process. And yes, we as an association fully support the Mission Act and support the VA's double down efforts to make the Mission Act accessible and successful for all of our veterans.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Congressman. Representative Mervan.
Thank you. As a new ranking member of the Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee, the problems, challenges facing employees at the VBA National Call Center greatly concern me. These employees, many of them veterans themselves, still face the pressures and problems associated with talk time, which limits them to 8 minutes and 30 seconds on a call in order to receive a fully successful rating. This standard doesn't account for many new and complex questions since the implementation of the PACT Act, nor does it take into consideration many common but difficult circumstances they face. With that, an open-ended question to all of you. How important is it to you and your members to be able to spend time talking about the circumstances to a real person at the VA to handle questions about the benefits and challenges that you face?
I'll jump in. For the association, NASDVA, it's critical because veterans want to talk to someone. They need to talk to someone. Doesn't matter if it's that 87-year-old veteran or that 30-year-old veteran, we want to talk to people, and we need to talk to people, and we need to have the time to do it. We need to be listened to, and we don't want to be cut off. That's the reality, sir.
Okay. And the point of me bringing that up is because I believe that also the case. There shouldn't be a running clock for our veterans who served, who are trying to access benefits, especially as we roll out the PACT Act and other benefits. My other question, very quickly, to Mr. Brown, is the VA Caregiver Support Program, the program for comprehensive assistance for family caregivers. Has anyone in your networking utilized that, and what is the acceptance rate, and what are your views on that?
The program is good, and it works well at times, but it's implemented throughout. There are plenty of people here that have used the program and across our organization. The best way to put it is, how do I say it? It works well when it's applied well. It all depends on each medical facility and how it's applied in each area. Sometimes it's pushed through easily. Other times you have to go through so many hurdles, it becomes a problem. The payments are delayed. There's all kinds of things that happen, but when it works great for our veterans.
Okay. I thank you very much. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Congressman, and I want to thank you folks all for being here, sharing your 2023 legislative priorities with us. Look, I just want to tell you all that we value and appreciate what you do. We appreciate the thoughtfulness you put into your opening statements, and appreciate you being here and fielding questions. We will do our level best to do right by the folks who have served us and the folks who have sacrificed for us. So thank you. We'll keep this record open for a week, and with that, this hearing is adjourned.